Senator Booker.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the time. Ms. Bondi, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
And thank you for being willing to meet with me in my office. I really value that time that we had together. If there's anything that's been demonstrated in this hearing thus far, is there is a serious crisis of faith in our judicial system in America. And we are at a time where, as Judge Learned Hand reminded us in his writings and speeches, that the power of the Constitution is only strong as long as it is believed in and had faith by the American people. And that faith is shaken by so much of the political tumult. And as we have a new administration coming in and a lot of the protestations about retribution or going after political opponents, I know you could expand your empathy enough to understand why there are many that really worry about your independence. But I've heard you over and over again in this hearing, as much as I've tried to focus on it as I've gone back and forth between Senate Foreign Relations and another Floridian, Marco Rubio. But I am hearing from you that you understand that the Attorney General's guiding star is the U.S. Constitution and her client is the American people, that there can be no argument about that.
Yes, Senator.
Yes. And more than that, though, I hope that you, should you be confirmed, understand that there is an urgency in not just demonstrating through your actions that independence, but beginning to heal this country's lack of faith and shaken faith in that independence, in the U.S. Constitution. History may not long remember what any of us individually do here, but for the sake of our democracy, what you do to restore and repair the American faith, whether they be Democrats, Independents, or Republicans, is vital. I want to switch here to say publicly that when Donald Trump appointed Craig Carpenito as the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, it was over the objections of myself and then Senator Menendez. I was wrong in my anticipation that he would not do good things in our state. He partnered with local leaders like those in Newark, New Jersey, to dramatically drive down crime. He was good for the safety of the city in which I live and the one that I led. Part of his strategy was to focus his resources on the most violent criminals. But that also meant that he used something that you know of called prosecutorial discretion. His strategies aligned with that of local leaders and was able to create historic drops in our murder rate. You know, through your experience, and you're intimately familiar, that enforcement decisions prosecutors must make every day, which charge to bring, which plea deal to offer, or what sentencing recommendation it makes, it's very important that local prosecutors understand that. Given this enormous discretion our legal system gives them, that they are best determined to make decisions about public safety. I'm very concerned that many people are starting to call for a time in our country where the Department of Justice should prosecute state and local prosecutors who exercise that prosecutorial discretion. As Attorney General, will you commit to respecting the autonomy of state and local prosecutors?
Senator, we have to work together with state and local prosecutors. That's what I did my entire career. And if confirmed as Attorney General, I will continue to do that. They serve a vital function in our justice system.
And you understand, like in my state, that sometimes they will decide not to go after certain low-level offenses in order to use their scarce resources to focus on the strategy of pursuing more dangerous people.
Yes, Senator, I completely understand that.
And those decisions shouldn't be politicized if they're part of a larger public safety strategy.
No, Senator. When I was a state prosecutor, we used to sit down with the U.S. attorneys and talk about cases and work together. And that's what I'm discussing about bringing back the cooperation between state and local
Thank you, Ms.
governments.
Bond. I just want to continue. One of the most stunning hypocrisies I've found since I've been down here in Washington is every politician gives lip service to driving down gun violence. But the very federal authority, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm, that is primarily focused on enforcing America's gun laws and keeping people safe, is hamstrung by federal leaders. The ATF's core responsibility is assisting in local law enforcement. When I was a mayor, I detailed local law enforcement to the ATF, but I'm stunned at how they have been stripped of resources, of their budget, and all of their capabilities to go after illegal gun running. When I was mayor of the city of Newark, we couldn't find one gun crime that was done with a legally purchased gun. But when I turned to the ATF leader at that time told me in private, we don't have the resources, support, or legal ability to go after these crimes. I am concerned about our ability to fight gun crime in America that threatens our law enforcement officers as well as people in communities from red counties to blue cities. Will you commit to doing everything you can to making sure the ATF has its resources and the legal power to pursue illegal gun runners in our country?
Senator, I will do everything in my power to prevent illegal gun runners in our country. When I left being a state prosecutor to run for Attorney General, I almost didn't run because I was working on a wire case involving illegal gun runners.
The DOJ issued in 2022 a use of force policy for its federal law enforcement officers. It was approved by the heads of the DEA, FBI, U.S. Marshals, and ATF, and many of them said it is actually a use of force policy that actually protects law enforcement officers as well as protects others from having their rights violated. It was also endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police and NATO, the National Association of Police Organizations. This policy is considered best practices in law enforcement. Will you commit to continuing this policy?
Senator, I have not read the policy. I will review the policy, and I will report back directly to you if I am confirmed as Attorney General, and consult with law enforcement. Absolutely.
And I would appreciate if you looked at the policy and I submit questions for the record, hoping that you can elucidate maybe more of your thoughts on this.
Certainly.
And then I will also say, as my last question, because I see my time has run out and I look forward to a second round, the DOJ issued a policy regarding chokeholds, which limited the use of no-knock warrants and chokeholds. It's worth noting that Florida has outlawed no-knock entries altogether since 1994. Would you commit to continuing the 2021 DOJ policy on these issues?
I'm familiar with the policy. I have not read it. I'm committed to reading it and studying it and reporting back to you on that policy once again.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, welcome. Congratulations.
Senator Booker, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you, and I thank you for the time that you gave me in a very hurried inaugural weekend.
Yes.
It was amazing that we were able to fit that in. And I want to echo some of my Senate colleagues who just said you are very informed and seem to be extraordinarily committed to this task and this goal, and I'm grateful for that. I want to jump in on some of the things we talked about right away. I'm so grateful for Senator Kaine bringing up Haiti and the importance for us to come up with some bipartisan foreign policy agenda or strategy to deal with that crisis there. I want to bring attention to the conflict in Sudan, which has created the largest and fastest growing humanitarian crisis in the world. We see right now tens of millions of people in need of assistance. The humanitarian crisis from hunger and malnutrition all the way to political destabilization in neighboring nations like Egypt, which are seeing this extraordinary overflow of urgencies as a result of the immigration and displaced people that are landing in that country. I'm deeply concerned about recent reporting from the New York Times stating that the SAF has used chemical weapons on at least 2 occasions. And I am really believing that we are lacking the kind of pressure on a lot of our allies and other nations that are involved in this conflict. And so this is a real time for, and as I talked about now, Secretary of State Rubio, about really aligning a diplomatic strategy in trying to bring about an end to this conflict, which will not be solved ultimately through the use of military conflict and needs a diplomatic solution. And so for now, in the short term, the need to protect civilians is paramount. And this is an issue where obviously, should you be confirmed, you can lead. And I think, in my opinion, one of the things that it's been lacking from is just a general prioritization. So first and foremost, will you commit to prioritizing Sudan and an end to this horrific humanitarian crisis and politically destabilizing reality we see now?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the great responsibilities of this role is prioritization of what we speak out against on the world stage at the United Nations. And I'm grateful for this committee's bipartisan work on the Sudan Accountability Act. The special envoy position is very important, and raising the awareness within the public of how significant this humanitarian crisis is.
And the challenge we have is there's implicated nations in supplying arms to this conflict. I'm wondering if you have some thoughts about how you could use your position to try to bring about an end of the cooperative parties that are fueling the conflict.
Absolutely. I mean, we will have to have strong conversations led by the President and Secretary Rubio with the UAE, the Egyptians, the Saudis, and that will be critical. I'm not going to get ahead of the Secretary of State and the President, but certainly will be supporting them at the U.S.-UN mission to do so.
Okay, and then just the ideas of refugee assistance in the area and some of the specific, as we talked about, some of the specific UN agencies that really are the lead in providing that. And it's concerning to me, and I know I heard Senator Coons point this out, this idea of pausing some of this aid at this time for 3 months could have sort of a cataclysmic impact, not just on the humanitarian crisis, but also on the stability of some of our allies in that region. Specifically from the Chad-Sudan border to Egypt as well. Some of the life-saving work done by UNHCR, the World Food Program, and more. And I'm just wondering if you could share with the committee some of your thoughts about how to navigate the urgent importance of these UN agencies and their ongoing work.
I think, again, World Food Program is a very successful program. It's results-focused. Its significant voluntary funding piece is a testament to that and the significant bipartisan support, and it is beneficial to America from a national security perspective, but also from an agricultural perspective, from an agribusiness manufacturing perspective as well, an American workforce perspective. So I think we need to look at all of our programs, do an assessment of, do they answer the questions of, does it make America stronger, safer, more prosperous? That should be our guiding light, and America First, peace through strength. And I am very committed to ensuring that all the U.S.-UN programs that we do that assessment, and where America leads, I think we're going to come out in top in terms of the efficacy.
And I'll just say in conclusion, because my time is up, the challenge we often have is we're reactive to crises, that if investments were made early on in the stability of nations, we could have done much better. And in many ways, with this global power contest between us and the Chinese, we allow them to get advantages from our lack of even engagement or focus. The continent of Africa is the future in terms of humanity. 1 out of every 4 people on the planet Earth will be from the African continent by 2050. It seems that the Russians and the Chinese understand that because they're playing large and significant, and I would say a profoundly disrupting force there. And so having a person in the position in which you're nominated for who is focused on the continent, who is engaged and making sure that we as the United States protect our interests, things that make us safe, strong, and prosperous, and understand that as we look to the future, we have to be in now in helping to avert not only the crises that often begin to destabilize regions and cause fertile ground for terrorism and government overthrows, but also start to develop the bonds of trust and partnership that are necessary for long-term prosperity for us and many of the extraordinary nations who want to ally with us and not the Chinese. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
The flu here, but thought it was really important to come.
Everybody's got flu.
Yeah, it's been pretty rough, but I appreciate the time. And Mr. Patel, if I can jump right in, 12 prosecutors, career prosecutors, were involved in an investigation and prosecuting the cases against President Trump and were recently fired. Some of those that were involved in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. Do you know who Brett Reynolds is?
Maybe, but it doesn't ring a bell at this point. So
You're under oath. You have no recollection of who Brett Reynolds is?
if you could provide me with a little more context, I could possibly remember.
Are you aware of any plans or discussions to punish in any way, including termination, FBI agents or personnel associated with Trump investigations?
Senator, just to be clear, I did not participate in any of those DOJ
Sir,
decisions.
that's a yes or no question. Are you aware of any plans or discussions to punish in any way, including termination, FBI agents or personnel associated with Trump investigations? Yes or no?
I'm not aware of that,
Thank you.
Senator.
There is no evidence of wrongdoing by FBI employees involved in these investigations. If you do pursue investigations of those involved, will you commit to using standard processes, including a standard review by the FBI Inspections Division and the Inspector General?
Senator, I will honor all those review processes.
You will honor those review processes.
Yes, Senator.
If these are actions that the FBI employees, if there are actions against FBI employees that do not follow those standards process that happen before you get in, will you commit to reversing any decision prior to your arrival so that those standard processes and the standard review by the FBI Inspections Division will take place?
I don't know what's going on right now over there, but I'm committed to you, Senator, and your colleagues that I will honor the internal review process of the FBI.
Have you made any commitments to anyone about pursuing any investigations or targets if you are FBI director?
Only violent criminals and terrorists.
Have you had any conversations with anyone on the transition team about pursuing any investigations or targets?
Only following the Constitution.
Again, are you certain?
That I have told people on the
Have you made?
administration.
Are you certain? Have you had any conversations with anyone on the transition team about pursuing any investigations or targets?
Senator, to the best of my recollection, I've only said I will use the Constitution.
Have you discussed specific investigations or targets you would pursue as FBI director with the President of the United States?
Senator, to the best of my recollection, no.
Are you certain?
To the best of my recollection, no.
According to public reports, you were subpoenaed by the federal prosecutors to testify as a witness before the grand jury investigation investigating the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. And you testified before the grand jury, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you were before the grand jury, you pled the fifth on the basis of self-incrimination, correct?
I utilized my constitutional rights during that process with the advice and consent of counsel and appeared before that grand jury.
I will take that as a yes. And you are familiar, I imagine, with Section 6002 of Title 18.
Off the top of my head, Senator, not.
Well, Section 6002 is the immunity statute. Whenever a witness refuses to testify or provide other information before a grand jury based upon the privilege against self-incrimination, the court can order the witness to testify. The witness must comply with the order, but they receive immunity, which means that no testimony or any other information provided before the grand jury can be used against them in any criminal proceeding. You were compelled to testify as a witness in the Mar-a-Lago classified document case. Did you participate in any criminal conduct involved in that case?
Involved in which, the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case?
Yes.
No, I testified through compulsion by court order.
You received immunity for providing information that was self-incriminating. Do you remember the name of the prosecutor who questioned you?
There were multiple, Senator. I do not.
Was it one of the people, were any of them people that were fired this past week?
I have no idea, Senator.
Are you certain? You're under oath.
I'm aware that I'm under oath, Senator, and I have no idea, and I did not participate in the removal of any DOJ prosecutor.
What was the information you provided that you received immunity for?
Senator, I would love my grand jury testimony to be released, but as you know, that grand jury testimony has been sealed by the Department of Justice, and I'm not allowed to discuss it here.
Well, I find it troubling that you do not know the law here, and let me tell you what the law is. Rule 6 governs grand jury proceedings. Under Rule 6E, grand jurors, court reporters, and prosecutors are bound to secrecy. But witnesses are not bound by secrecy. You were a witness in the classified documents case. You are not bound by secrecy. You can tell us everything that happened in that room and everything you testified about. I'll ask you again, what information did you provide to the grand jury?
In this, we are in agreement, Senator. Get my grand jury testimony. I want it made public. I asked the Department of Justice to make it public, and they refused to do so.
There is no legal bound against you telling us right now what you testified to.
When I asked for my transcript to be released, the
Sir,
Department
did
of
you or
Justice,
did you not commit a crime?
Senator, I did not commit a crime.
Then why won't you tell us what you testified to?
Because it occurred over the course of 3 weeks. I don't have the ability to recall everything I testified to, but I'm asking you to put my transcript
Did you testify to
down.
witnessing the President of the United States declassifying documents.
Senator, what I testified to is best captured by that transcript
So
in real
you're not
time.
willing to tell Congress, after making many pledges today about transparency, whether or not you testified to witnessing the President of the United States declassify documents. In the name of all the values you have said today, did you or did you not testify to witnessing the President of the United States declassify documents?
I testified accordingly and under oath, and I encourage you to get that transcript.
And by the law of our land, you are free to tell people, what are you hiding from Congress? Answer the question. Did you testify to witnessing the President of the United States declassifying documents, yes or no?
Senator, the grand jury testimony is available to you. I encourage you to make it public.
As you likely know, the second volume of Jack Smith's report about the classified document case is not public yet. To fulfill our constitutional duty of advice and consent, the President, on nominations, members of this committee have asked the DOJ to review the report. Do you agree that Congress should thoroughly review its nominees? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Now, last question, and I'll be done. When you and I met, you told me that you wanted to remove 11,000 FBI personnel or move many of them, and you said that again today. You have looked at an org chart to understand what offices and functions that you'll be pulling from. I don't think you've done a serious analysis, but I do think you have an assignment from Donald Trump to gut the FBI. You said yourself, I'll shut down the FBI Hoover building. There are people specifically that you are targeting, I believe. And do you agree that you have already prepared plans to remove certain individuals from their offices? For example, individuals that will be replaced by political personnel. The political personnel that are being put in an institution that you and I discussed that has no political appointees but one, the political personnel involve these names: Erica Knight, Tom Ferguson, Greg Bitzner.
You stated your question. Would you answer? Or don't you want to? Okay.
We can move on.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Britt. You're so timely. Senator Booker.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Reitz, I want to pick up with a discussion that I found a little troubling. I'd love to go into it a little bit more with you. It just sounds like that you have been suggesting that government officials can ignore a court order if they disagree with it. You're pointing to some of the worst cases in our nation, like Korematsu. This would really create a constitutional crisis in this American context in which we're living right now if our courts impose injunctions that restrict or compel government action, and then government officials go against that. To me, that's the very nature of what a constitutional crisis is. My staff pulled a tweet of yours that you compared the Dred Scott decision to the court's decision in same-sex marriages. And so I want to know, do you think public officials have it within their right, if they find it morally wrong, the Obergefell decision, to violate that court order or that court's conclusions?
Thank you, Senator Booker. So my position I've been consistent on, which is that parties to the litigation are bound by the lawful holdings of their respective court. I understand that there is genuine jurisprudential disagreement about the scope of certain holdings, whether they can apply nationally or to just litigants or other litigants. But I think that it is a fair discussion for attorneys in good faith to discuss the scope of a holding of a case.
I find academic discussions important in our national dialogue, but you're being nominated for a very important position. And my question to you, I guess, is very plain, is if you morally disagree with a court order, do you believe you can defy that court order, that the Trump administration, that the government, that you in your position can defy that court order?
Senator Booker, I appreciate the clarification. However, just a general reference in this hearing to a litigant morally disagreeing to the decision of a court, in my opinion, is too hypothetical for me to be able to answer with precision.
Do you understand that that is not a comfortable assurance for me when there is credible concerns about the Supreme Court making a decision, as in Obergefell, and having an administration that feels that it can defy that. You're not giving me great confidence by stating unequivocally that we are a nation that respects the separation of powers, the role of the courts. And far be it from me to lecture you, and I hope you don't take it that way, but the traditions of our country, if you disagree with a morally long law, the traditions we exalt, one of the two exceptions of statues underneath the dome of the Capitol is Martin Luther King, who was very clear about when you find a law morally wrong and you break that law, you accept the consequences of that, which is jail or removal from a position. I'm seeing right now good faith actors within government resigning from their position. That is a very different tradition, that vaunted tradition in our country, than a person in a position like you were nominated from, willfully disregarding a court order. That is in its very nature a constitutional crisis, and your failure in this forum to resolutely state your commitment to abide by court orders, I hope you can understand why that would be troubling to many of the senators before you. You understand that that's troubling.
I understand, Senator Booker, that that is a perspective that members of this body may have.
Very difficult for me to swallow that, and honestly, you send a chill to me and my concerns about the current administration. Ms. Dillon, I am happy to see you here because of the pride of your family behind you. You could see it written over their faces. I hope you understand that. They are, it's just extraordinary for me as an American to see you sitting here and your incredible family behind you. I have some very direct questions for you that I do not have time with because I fear the chairwoman, but I'm going to put them in writing, and they have to do with your knowledge of any plans to dismiss employees and a lot of the things were going on here that do rise concerns to me. So I'll put them in writing. Would you commit to responding to me?
Yes, Senator, I commit to responding to your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam
Thank
Chairwoman.
you, Senator Booker. You too are timely.
Thank you for the same kindness that you extend to me that you extend to my colleague.
Senator Lee.
Governor, it's good to see you here. My office lives with this fierce urgency. There's an American being held right now in Gaza named Idan Alexander. And knowing every day that he's being tortured, his suffering, and that of his family back in New Jersey is one of the central urgencies of my staff and my team. We know that we've seen a lot of the hostage releases happen during ceasefires. And during those times, the pathways to peace are open that would relieve the suffering of innocent Palestinians as well. We know that Hamas cannot remain in control, that they must release hostages and surrender so we can start the reconstruction and secure the safety and security of not just Palestinians, but the Israeli state as well. But again, the grief hanging over many of those who know the families involved makes central clarity to getting this done. I think that one of your most important missions, should you be confirmed, is getting the release of the hostages and aiding to the end of this nightmare that is fueling the suffering of Israelis and Palestinians. And so tactically, I'm curious of your thoughts, especially given the ceasefires that have enabled moments where hostages have been released. You know, during the first ceasefire, we saw releases of numerous hostages and commitments being made. I'm wondering if you can comment on what your thoughts are about how your role could help us get Idan home and an end to this nightmare.
Senator, I appreciate your question, and let me say emphatically that it would not be one of the most important things that I would consider on my duty list, if confirmed. It would be the most important thing. That American citizen from New Jersey that you care deeply about and you've worked so diligently with, and I'm deeply grateful for the efforts you've made with that family. That has to be the first item of business before anything else. Every hostage should have already been home. The only reason they're not is because of Hamas. Hamas, who has used them as bargaining chips, Hamas, who has used them to torture, Hamas, who, when they do release, often only because they feel compelled and absolutely obligated to give them one more day of survival, they do so in the most horrific way by humiliating the hostages.
And I'm going to interrupt because I have one more question I want to get done.
Okay.
And I interrupt you because I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I was there on October 7th. The viciousness and the brutality of that attack that triggered this whole thing lies at the feet of this terrorist organization. So you and I are in complete agreement. What I'm asking, and I'm hoping I can get in writing because I really would like to get to my next question, is that we still have strategic and tactical decisions to make, and you will be one of the players at the table. Your affirmation and confirmation that this will be the most important thing, getting a United States citizen home, I hear that, and I'd like to be able to discuss that with you more. The second question I have is that the Jerusalem Post reported that the Trump administration's pivot to Russia is making our allies, including Israel, wary of sharing intelligence, fearing that doing so could expose their assets. There's precedent for this concern. On May 10th, 2017, while meeting with Russia's foreign minister and ambassador to Washington in the Oval Office, Trump shared intelligence about an Islamic State threat with specifics that came from a spy embedded in the terrorist group on behalf of Israel. The Israel press reported that Trump's leak had placed that person's life at risk and cut off Israel from his intel. Now, fast forward, yesterday we learned that the highest ranking national security officials in the Trump administration, including the National Security Advisor, the head of the CIA, the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of State, and others, discussed sensitive and imminent military operations in a commercial unclassified messaging app and accidentally included a reporter in that chat. This seems to be a pattern and practice of the administration to be using unclassified platforms for these kind of communications. So I deeply value our relationship with Israel. I know you do. Does it concern you that our close ally is now hesitant to share intelligence because they fear the Trump administration and its top intelligence officials can't be trusted and are continuing to get evidence to that effect?
Senator, with appreciation for the question, I can only tell you that I've seen some news reports, but not detailed, and I have no knowledge of what has actually happened. If confirmed, I will work diligently with the President and all of my colleagues to ensure that there is integrity in all that is done. And I have confidence the President will charge me with that responsibility.
Thank you, Governor Huckabee. And I hope we can talk soon about Idan and his horrific reality and getting him home. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Me to stay here till the end of the meeting, but just in case something happens, I want to say to all the panelists, as chairman of this committee, thank you for your time and hard work put into this. Senator Booker.
Mr. McDonough, what happens when a person with a life-threatening disease cannot get access to a life-saving drug?
Not a good outcome.
Be more specific for me.
If it's a life-threatening situation and they're not getting access to that medication, then the life is at danger.
And you know situations, right?
I do know situations.
Where contributing to the death of an American was their inability to access, over time, the life-saving drugs that they need.
Or because of the process of being put into place, such as prior authorizations that wasn't done timely and the person stroked and died, yes.
So why aren't we calling this what it is? My friends across the aisle and others have called this a scam. Multi-level marketing is a scam. Internet people that prey on senior citizens, that's scammers. This is a level of corporate violence that is costing American lives, a level of colossal greed at the expense of patient well-being. Am I overstating the fact, Mr. McDonough?
No, there's situations like that with every pharmacy.
Yeah, and so I've been in your state, and I sat around a table of senior citizens who each of them told me stories that they ration their drugs against doctors' orders, cut pills in half. What kind of peril does that put people in?
They're not getting the medication they're supposed to be getting, and it's going to be endangering their lives.
Endangering their lives. Because the desperate people in our country who have drugs for cancers, have drugs for heart conditions, have drugs for conditions that are threatening their lives, are put in the moral dystopia of having to make a decision that is not left to them, to ration drugs or not have them at all when they fulfill the prescription, when they can't fulfill the prescription from their doctor. This is not a scam. This is a moral obscenity, and it's corporate violence. The former FTC chair, Lena Khan, under her leadership, released an interim staff report that found that the three biggest PBMs, Caremark Rx, CVS, Express Scripts, and Optimum Rx, marked up numerous life-saving drugs, thousands of percents, and many others by hundreds of percents, dispensed at their affiliated pharmacies. These drugs include treatment for cancer, HIV, multiple sclerosis, pulmonary hypertension, and more. Shockingly, hundreds of times the cost of people just over the Canadian border. They made more than $7.3 billion in revenue from dispensing drugs, hiking up prices over the course of just 6 years. This idea of breaking up big medicine is not just about dealing with awful antitrust. And there are a lot of industries where corporate concentration has caused consumers to pay more. But in this case, it's not just causing consumers to pay more, it is, as your testimony has said, threatening the lives of Americans. PBMs are not the only contributor to high drug prices, but the vertical integration that's allowed powerful market players to buy other entities in the supply chain and steer patients towards drugs with higher out-of-pocket costs is causing grievous harms in a country, and it cannot be allowed to go on. According to the research of the American Economic Liberties Project, released on March 10th, at least 326 U.S. pharmacies have closed just since December 19th, 2024, when Congress abandoned a bipartisan, bicameral PBM reform as part of the stopgap spending bill. We know how to solve this problem. Inaction is complicity. There is nothing short of an evil going on in our country that is allowing millions of Americans to suffer under an unjust system that's hurting small business people with you that have a larger focus in life. Not only running your business, but helping rural communities. Again, I've been in your community, helping people get access to drugs, even when you deliver them in the middle of the night. This is wrong. This is unjust. This is violence. This is moral obscenity going on in our nation. We know the solutions. This committee has got to fix that. Thank you.
Senator
I agree with what you said about it being a foreign policy crisis, the great debt and the downgrading that we just saw. To be pushing a bill right now that would add $2.7 trillion to our national debt is just outrageous. And I've been grateful for the small group of Republicans here in the Senate and a number in the House who have just called this out as plain as it is. To do this now will shake America's economy, give tax breaks to the wealthiest amongst us who are doing quite well, and not help with the current economic crisis we're facing. But that's frankly just something I didn't want to talk about right now, where I really want to just continue our conversation about Sudan. And I know you know, as was said passionately by one of my colleagues, the gravity of the crisis that's over there. Full stop, it's the greatest humanitarian crisis on the planet Earth. There's ethnic cleansing going on, an active genocide as described by our own government and others. That people are fleeing right now with the recent attacks on Zamzam and more, but I know you're very aware of this. What I want to ask you about specifically is that not only did you acknowledge the genocide and say, I quote, being backed by countries that we consider allies elsewhere in the world, this is being fueled, you were saying, we must draw a clear line on that. You specifically mentioned the UAE, and you said, and I quote, take UAE, for example, they are an important partner in the Middle East, but we must be clear they are currently supporting an entity that is carrying out genocide. I'm just wondering, have you been able to draw that clear line in your conversations with the UAE, specifically addressing the issue of the supplying of arms?
Well, again, and I wasn't satisfied when people would answer this way when I was sitting on that side, but now on this side with diplomacy, you always want to be careful what you say publicly, because then people don't want to talk to you if they think it's going to happen in the future. Let me say this, we have expressed, not just to the UAE, but to other countries, that they are turning it into a proxy war, that it's destabilizing the region, that in fact it's creating an environment, not just in Sudan, but it's threatening to South Sudan already faces pretty substantial challenges, but some of that threatens to spill over and make it even worse.
If I can interrupt, Marco, because I think your answer is justifiable. The UAE is a vital ally to the United States in a lot of other critical areas of the world.
But it doesn't serve their interest. But my point is, it doesn't serve the interest of some of these countries involved to continue to pursue this route, because instability there is going to create a breeding nest for
And I guess when my hope is,
radicalism.
and I know you and I can have further conversations privately, is that we are pressing hard on those people that are fueling the conflict. But I want to ask the next part of this question is, the U.S. leadership is critical to end this. This is actually something that we can achieve, not only alleviation of the suffering, but an end of this. If a humanitarian corridor is created and respected, this is something we can help to do. Finding diplomatic resolution to the conflict is something we can do. Now, there's a bipartisan a commitment in this committee, mandate to appoint a special envoy for Sudan. We know that that kind of leadership can help address this the worst crisis on the globe. Time is not in our favor. Are you going to get a special envoy appointed, as colleagues on both sides of this aisle want to happen?
We do. We want to. We'd love to have somebody in charge of that. We know we have a similar arrangement with DRC, Rwanda, and have seen it play dividends.
Mr. Secretary, all I'm looking for is a sense of urgency and an answer yes.
Yes, the answer is, but we have to find the right person, and that's the challenge.
Next, 30 million people in Sudan require humanitarian assistance. In February, it was reported that, and you heard this passionately, that the freeze in humanitarian assistance is causing untold suffering. I was there myself in Chad last year and saw the role that we were playing. And frankly, I saw how great American companies like Plumpy Nut here were doing good, a double bottom line. They were helping to alleviate the crisis over there, as well as helping American businesses here. I just am hoping that you can say that you will commit to resume and even surge United States humanitarian assistance, particularly food aid, as soon as humanly as possible.
Well, all of that has been approved. All of the life-saving food and medicine programs have been turned on. To the extent that there's been impediments, has been one or two things. Either A, on the payment system front, where we faced a couple of weeks where we couldn't get money moving through Treasury because of a variety of different reasons, including changes to the technology, but that's largely been resolved. And the other is the ability to distribute it once the aid arrives at site.
Marco, Mr. Secretary, you and I have been friends for a very long time. A sense of urgency is what I'm asking for right now. That every day that we delay or that we don't plow through the line of defense here, that's stopping this from happening. People are dying. I know you, and I know we can do better. And as you and I both were taught back in the days we were playing football, better is possible, good is not enough. I want to move to my next question for you. Is the refugee camps, the U.S. main corridor to life-saving assistance, which I said to you I visited, I'm just hoping that we can make sure that we are doing more. And I'll be specific in an example of another area. despite the escalating humanitarian crisis, the United Nations Humanitarian Air Service is vital. The termination of those flights, makes it likely that all of Chad's aid into Chad will stop and end, and they will have no resources by the end of July. It can take a week to reach Chad's border from the capital via motorcade. And so this is a vital lifeline that we were supporting. During the rainy season, you can't make that trip by road at all. And I know, again, that you know this. Why was the award terminated for these flights? It is, to me, this is just very plain. This is the lifeline. And it was denied a waiver, which we reached out for. It's just, again, a very plain way that we could save lives. And I'm not sure if it's just because it had the UN in the title, but can we get a resumption of these flights that will literally save lives by getting resources?
I think the answer to your question is that while you were talking about a mode of transport versus the actual aid, and I understand how important that is, then the question is what percentage of responsibility the United States should bear in comparison to other countries that have capability and are actually closer to the problem. So there's a broader issue here, and that is there does come a point at which we have to understand that the United States, there's great causes all over the world. And I'm not speaking specifically about the flight because I owe you a specific answer on that question. I don't recall that waiver. I don't recall the denial.
Marco, that's all. Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, that's all I'm looking for.
But all I want you to understand is that not every program we've ever funded is going to be funded in the future because we have to balance these things.
Mr. Secretary, I am aware of that. I just want an answer. I mean, this is like Schindler's List. Doing a little more saves lives. And I know we are more capable than we are right now. And I'm asking for that answer.
I'll get you the answer on the flights.
And the flights and some of the other things I mentioned, and I'm happy to work with you on the special envoy. There are people on both sides that are willing to do that. And I'll say in conclusion, because I'm over, but other people did, I do not want to lecture you, especially because I know I've had enough conversations that I know your moral core. But what my colleague brought up very passionately about the Afrikaners, I want you to know as a person that talks to countries and leaders like you do all over Africa, they are already seeing us not prioritizing ambassadors. They see embassies being closed. But the torrent I got on the Afrikaners reminded me of the torrent I got from African leaders when the president called those countries like those in Africa shithole countries. The anguish and the anger and the disappointment and the feeling of double standards. So just from a diplomatic range, where we're in a competition in many ways on that continent, that you and I talked in your confirmation hearings about the profound moral urgencies, economic opportunity, security mandates, the cooperations with these countries. We have got to do a better job, in my opinion, and I've worked with you on these issues when you were a senator, diplomatically in prioritizing these issues. And I will partner with you in any way possible to make sure that we are addressing what I believe is a diplomatic shortfall right now in advancing American interests on the continent.
If I might just real quick, we haven't closed any embassies, so I think people are responding to like articles talking about the potential for embassy closures and things of that nature, but we haven't closed any embassies. And we have been engaged. Listen, Africa, to me, is one of the priorities that I've set for us in terms of our global view because of the opportunities, because of the youth of the continent, because of explosive growth that we're going to foresee. And as an example of it, one of the things we prioritized, which a lot of people thought was intractable, was trying to reach a peace agreement between the DRC and Rwanda. Now, it's not done, but we brought them both here to Washington, D.C. about a month ago. They signed a memorandum of understanding. The negotiations are moving forward. They're actually moving forward very well. Our hope is to arrive at a peace deal there that ultimately ends what was turning out to be a very brutal and difficult conflict. So I take your point on Sudan and the need for an envoy. We would love to find the right person to handle that portfolio because it has to be the right person. And we have played a supportive role. For example, the UK, about a month and a half ago, led a Sudan summit in London for a day, where a lot of other countries, we sent someone, we've offered to be helpful and work with them on it. But a lot of other countries either didn't make commitments or didn't live up to the commitments. The summit sort of was a minor disappointment because while everyone talks a big game around the world about it, they're not stepping up. But I take your point. I'll get you your answer on the flights because I'm not aware of that specific waiver. And on the envoy, we'd love to work with you to find the right person.
And the ambassadors and other things.
For many years.
Thank you. Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to join my colleagues and the ranking member and the chairman for condemning the violence of last night. We all abhor political violence and should, in every way, I think, investigate. And as the ranking member said, I think that it would be good to have a briefing from the FBI. I take note of something as one of the bipartisan leaders of our efforts on anti-Semitism to note that hate crimes in this country targeting religious groups are seen in so many of America's great religions, but none come close to the targeting of American Jews. And that should be an added layer of analysis as we try to combat this kind of violence and these kind of hate crimes. Mr. Chairman, I wanted to make 3 points very quickly and ask for some oversight hearings. Trump's Department of Justice has taken numerous concerning actions that demand the committee to exercise constitutional oversight. We are a co-equal branch in a government with checks and balances, and we need to address these issues in hearings. There are 3 concerning DOJ actions that I hope we can discuss, Mr. Chairman. First, we have the issue of due process-less deportations. This week, the conservative Cato Institute reported that over 50 of the Venezuelans imprisoned in El Salvador came to the U.S. legally with advanced U.S. government permission and entered at an official border crossing. Most Americans have only heard of Kilmar Obrego Garcia, but this report from the Cato Institute makes clear he is not the only person who was deported by the Trump administration without due process, who was legally in the United States. I'd like to without objection, I'd like to enter this Cato report into the record. I want to reiterate the committee's request led by my colleague, Senator Welch, for an oversight hearing into the circumstances surrounding the deportations of more than 200 people removed to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Acts, including the 50 individuals who, I repeat, entered the country legally through with our permission and are now in what is one of the more awful prisons on this planet. Mr. Chairman, you have for decades led and championed the Senate Judiciary Committee's exercise of our oversight, and we need to know who are these 50 people. Can we at least confirm their names and that they're still alive? And understand that an assault on due process anywhere is a threat to the due process rights everywhere. We have seen a 9-0 Supreme Court affirm that. Secondly, at last week's markup, you talked about the Department of Justice's cancellations of public safety grants. Here I have an unanswered letter I wrote on April 30th that was signed by every Democratic member of this committee and 30 Democratic senators total, which I'd like to enter into the record.
Is there objection? I hear none, so it's entered.
We were asking the department for information about the Office of Justice Program's abrupt decisions to cancel at least 365 public safety grants on April 22nd, 2025 that serve crime victims and improve public safety, totaling an estimated $500 million. These are programs that were supported in a bipartisan way that have led to more safety and security and strength in our community. Some of them have helped victims of crime, and they have been unjustly canceled. On the day of this letter, DOJ defunded programs that prosecutors, police, and sheriff's departments, judges, mental health service providers, academics, and more depend upon to keep America safe. This is an outrage to all of us on this committee who share a commitment to public safety, to have resources that we put out that we're being effective in an evidence-based way, to have them stopped by this administration demands that we at least have an oversight hearing to provide, to get a justification, or at the very least have letters responded to. Finally, Mr. Chairman, the Justice Department dismissed several civil rights cases against pattern and practice agencies of law enforcement yesterday. Almost 5 years to the day, this country watched in horror, and we all condemned, when a now convicted criminal, then a police officer, used deadly force to murder George Floyd. The Justice Department's Civil Rights Division thereafter investigated the Minneapolis Police Department's pattern and practices of constitutional violations and proposed a fair, court-enforceable consent order to prevent future police misconduct, but to improve the excellence of police accountability and professional standards. They did the same in Louisville, Kentucky, after Breonna Taylor was killed by police during a no-knock raid that was condemned by people on this committee and beyond in a bipartisan way. Yesterday, AG Bondi's Justice Department dropped both consent decrees in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Louisville, Kentucky, where neutral investigations and attorneys found evidence of constitutional and civil rights violations by those law enforcement agencies. Without more than saying that the consent decrees were, quote, no longer in the public interest, the department dismissed those cases along with 6 other investigations where it had shown a pattern and practice of the constitutional violations against American citizens. I sent a letter to the DOJ yesterday with my Democratic colleagues requesting the preservation of and submissions to the committee materials related to retracted police misconduct investigations and drop consent decrees. I asked to enter this letter into the record, sir.
Is there objection? I hear none, so it's entered.
To add to the further outrage to these DOJ actions, there are reports today that people are pushing the Trump administration to pardon Chauvin. This would be unacceptable, outrageous, and injurious to the public safety, injurious to community trust, injurious to the environments we need that keep people safe and support our law enforcement officers. We are lacking in our oversight of a department that appears to be on a turbocharged chip away at civil rights protections and not do common sense measures that can make our communities stronger and safer and have the highest professional standards in policing. I ask again for this third time that you hold an oversight hearing so that we can get some of the answers that Congress and the public deserve. As someone who used to be a mayor and oversee a police department that itself had a pattern and practice investigations, this is not to an end other than making our police department stronger, raising our professional standards, deepening trust, and ultimately creating an environment where we have greater community safety. I hope on these 3 issues we can have oversight hearings soon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With all the requests for oversight hearings, I think we're going to have to prioritize that. Before I call on the senator from Rhode Island, you mentioned something I said last week about grants, and I think I had information yet before the meeting was over that grants for nonprofits and law enforcement, that they were going to reinstitute the ones for law enforcement. That's what I think I said last week, Senator Whitehouse.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to that, sir?
Yeah.
Some of the proudest work that I've seen in this committee done by people on both sides, courageous leadership by Senator Cornyn and people on our side of the aisle, passed this extraordinary bill on public safety. And a lot of those grants weren't just to law enforcement that were improved. They were to address mental health, something we've all talked about on both sides of the aisle. To focus just on grants directly to law enforcement and not the grants that are going to institutions that help people with mental health. We know a lot of the gun crimes in our country have a lot of unaddressed mental health illness there. And so all of these grants are important, sir, not just the ones that are vital for law enforcement, but also the ones that are vital for public safety that go to nonprofits that deal with things like mental health that are critical for public safety.
Well, Senator Whitehouse and Senator Schiff withhold. We've got 11 people here, and I'd like to vote.
Make 2 brief observations. Number 1, it is interesting as our Democrat colleagues defend these nationwide injunctions that neither of them made any reference to the fact that the number of nationwide injunctions issued in the first 4 months is greater than the entire 20th century and is greater than all of the nationwide injunctions issued against Bush, Obama, and Biden combined. nor did they address the disturbing fact that of the 40 universal injunctions that have been issued in the last 4 months, 35 of them came from the same 5 judicial districts. There is a reason for this. Blue state attorneys general and radical leftist groups are seeking out affirmatively radical judges who they know will impose their own policy preferences. If it were simply, as our Democrat colleagues said, judges following the law, then you wouldn't have to keep going to the same radical judges over and over and over again, because judges across the board should do that. But the litigants know exactly who the zealots are that are on the bench, and that's who they are seeking out. I will also point out that the discussion about the urgency of protecting the safety of judges. Listen, I agree. We should protect the safety of every federal judge, but it is interesting because my Democrat colleagues were utterly silent during 4 years of the Biden administration when you had violent mobs outside the homes of Supreme Court justices unhappy with the Supreme Court's ruling in Dobbs, and the Biden Justice Department refused to enforce federal law and protect the justices. And my Democrat colleagues were perfectly happy with Supreme Court justices being threatened if they disliked the rulings that were coming from the Supreme Court justices. Unlike my colleagues, I believe we should protect judges regardless of whether I agree with them or not. We should protect their safety. And every time you hear a Democrat senator talk about protecting judges from acts of violence, you ought to ask them, why did they not have a word to say about the Biden Justice Department allowing mobs to threaten the families and children of Supreme Court justices night after night after night while Biden's Attorney General refused to follow the law? And with that, I'll recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. They asked Winston Churchill after World War II.
Would you indulge me for a moment?
We indulge you every moment.
I appreciate that act of generosity. It's just something you said that I think is actually dangerous and should be addressed, and you're welcome. But when Judge Anderol was killed in New Jersey, the Republican colleagues in the Senate, their outpouring of support, their outpouring of concern, they're willing to work together on a bipartisan bill was extraordinary. It shows the truth of this institution that despite some of the fiery rhetoric that you were sowing, we're really a bipartisan, working bipartisanship. Cornyn and Coons, after the incidents you're talking about, got together and actually passed a bill to better protect our Supreme Court justices, many of whom are friends of ours. You know, Gorsuch and I disagree on a lot of stuff. I knew his wife before he did. We studied together at Oxford. This implication that there was silence when there were threats on their people's houses is absolutely absurd. I remember the rhetoric and the comments, the concern from Coons. I actually distinctly remember you, Chairman, on more than once condemning those attacks on Republican-appointed jurists. To say things like that feeds just the partisanship in this institution and feeds the fiery rhetoric. And it's just plain not true. It's just plain not true. And I think you know that, but we can pull from the record from my colleagues in real time, literally days afterwards, condemning it. There's a lot of substantive things to say here, but to think that the lack of humanity when people's homes are being threatened was not in existence, I think that's unfair and really concerns me that you would say that in the way that you did.
Well, I thank my colleague from New Jersey. I will note, as John Adams observed, that facts are stubborn things. And it is existing federal law, 18 U.S.C. section 1507, that makes it a crime to protest at a judge's home. And the law provides whoever with the intent of interfering with, obstructing, or impeding the administration of justice, or with the intent or of influencing any judge, juror, witness, or court officer in the discharge of his duty, pickets or parades in or near a building housing a court of the United States, in or near a building or residence occupied or used by such judge, juror, witness, or court officer, or with such intent uses any sound truck or similar device or resorts to any other demonstration in or near any such building or residence, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. That is federal criminal law. Night after night after night, angry mobs were outside the Supreme Court justices' homes. And in the entire course of it, the Biden Justice Department prosecuted nobody. We had the Attorney General sitting at that table, and multiple Republican senators asked him, why are you not enforcing the law? What they are doing is a crime. And my friend from New Jersey said, it is a lie to say we, the Democrats, condone this. I would challenge, my friend, find a single Democrat senator on this committee holding the Attorney General to account for not enforcing this law. I was here at those hearings, and I do not recall a single Democrat senator saying to the Attorney General, you should arrest these people who are violating the law, you should protect the judges. I agree that there was general language against violence, but not a single Democrat senator that I ever saw in this committee was willing to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland to account for flagrantly disregarding the federal criminal law because the Biden administration agreed with the protesters and I think wanted those justices harassed at their home.
I really appreciate that you've now shifted the accusation you made earlier. Your accusation was that we were silent in the face of protests at Supreme Court justices' homes. Again, we joined together in a bipartisan way, not only to condemn that, but to pass legislation to extend round-the-clock security protection, literally days. It was introduced May 5th, passed the Senate in a bipartisan fashion on May 9th. So if you're saying that we didn't criticize Merrick Garland—
Did the Biden DOJ arrest a single person under this law?
You are now changing the
No, that is what I said. That is what I said.
Again, I'll pull the record.
Did the Biden DOJ arrest even one?
Again.
The answer is no.
My point to you is the accusation that the Democrats on this committee do not care about the safety of federal judges. I did not interrupt you, sir. I would appreciate if you let me finish. I am sick and tired of hearing the kind of heated partisan rhetoric, which is one of the reasons why we have such divisions in this country. The attacks we see from the President of the United States of America trolling and dragging judges through is what we should be talking about, that puts people in danger. I'm simply taking issue with the claim that you made at the top that people on the Democratic side of the aisle do not care about the safety and the security of judges and said nothing. You said we were silent after people's houses were protested. That is a patent lie, sir. We were not silent. We took action. We've joined in a bipartisan way to protect those judges, as was done in a bipartisan way to protect a New Jersey judge after their horrific attack at their home. So I see you now trying to shift the debate to whether we talk to an attorney general. I'm simply taking issue with this accusation that somehow we Democrats are so bad because we don't call out threats to our judicial colleagues. And that is wrong. You could change the argument now that you want, but what you said was patently not true and was, in fact, a patent lie.
So I do enjoy the fact that my colleague from New Jersey raises his voice and says it's a patent lie and says he's doing so in defense of lowering the rhetoric. There is some irony to doing those two together. I'll point out that in the entire course of those remarks, Senator Booker did not dispute the central point I made, which is the Biden Justice Department arrested 0 people, prosecuted 0 people for violating the criminal law, and every Democrat senator on this committee was silent about it. And this was an ongoing pattern for months. And I would note also that the senator from New Jersey clutched his pearls about language threatening judges, and yet I do not recall a single Democrat senator of this committee saying a word when Chuck Schumer went to the steps of the Supreme Court and threatened the safety of the Supreme Court justices by name, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and he said, you have unleashed the whirlwind and you will pay the price. And not a single Democrat senator had a word to say about this. And so their outrage is selective. And I will give my colleague from New Jersey a chance to just answer a simple yes-no question. Should the Biden Justice Department have enforced the criminal law against protesting at a justice's home? Yes or no?
So the rank hypocrisy of Chuck Schumer apologizing the next day and you holding that standard for him and not for your president, who you actually rightfully described when you were running against him in a primary. I would love to run those tapes of how you perfectly talked about the danger of our president and his rhetoric. But now you are failing, in fact, blind to the very things you're accusing Chuck Schumer of. I don't think Donald Trump would know an apology if it hit him in the head. Never has said apologizing. So again, you are very, very, sir, very, very deep into the waters of hypocrisy in your criticisms of Chuck Schumer.
So let the record reflect that Spartacus did not answer the question and did not tell us whether the criminal law should be enforced, because he knows the answer is yes, and he knows that the Biden Department of Justice was being wildly political and partisan in refusing to enforce the law because they disagreed with the Supreme Court justice's rulings. I have also, in addition to Senator Durbin, who's given his opening statement, I have a written opening statement from Chairman Grassley. Without objection, that written statement is entered into the record, and I will now briefly introduce our distinguished witnesses. We have three.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'm grateful for the witnesses that are here. I'm grateful for others as well. We are in a crisis moment for the United States of America, for our Constitution, and for our shared values. And we see this by a president who's pursuing a course that violates our laws, that violates our morals and our ideals, that is an attack on our Constitution, that is bringing chaos, corruption, and cruelty to the fore in the United States. I'm grateful to hear the comments by my colleagues and the responses that have been given by our witnesses today, but let's just be clear, the deployment of the National Guard and military troops was an unlawful exercise of authority. It was an action that is provocative and creating more of a crisis than it is solving, when even the police leader of Los Angeles is saying that this makes it harder for them to do their job, is a testimony to Donald Trump's end not being strength in our streets, security in our streets. It is a testimony to what he's really trying to do, is create more and more of a provocation and more of a cause for him to violate our laws. Just last month, we know that Los Angeles is not an isolated incident, because all around the country we're seeing outrageous flaunting of the law. Just last month, the DOJ took the unprecedented step of arresting the mayor of my city, Newark, New Jersey, outside an immigration detention center. The DOJ charged a United States Congresswoman, LaMonica McIver, who was exercising her congressional oversight authority to inspect that detention facility. And as people rushed out, agents rushed out to wrongfully arrest a mayor, catching her up in the process, and now they're bringing charges against her. Trump brought us to the precipice of a constitutional crisis when he deported more than 250 people to an El Salvadorian prison under the Alien Enemies Act without allowing them to appear before the judge, 50 of whom came into this country legally. And when a unanimous Supreme Court ordered him to bring back the individuals who by the government's own admissions had been mistakenly deported, home to avail himself of the constitutional mandated process he was entitled to, the president refused to comply. The price that we are paying right now is immeasurable, but I see it all around New Jersey. Our streets are less safe. Our economy is being severely hit. We have victims of crimes who are afraid to come forward to bear witness against the person who victimized them. We are seeing law enforcement resources invaluable to stopping crime being pulled away from other agencies and directed to the invasion of schools and courts, as we've just heard, to tearing apart the fabric of our community, not to get criminals, not to get violent gang members, but to separate families and to, in so many instances, truly undermine the very people who give strength to our communities and our neighborhoods. And so I am doing what my other colleagues are doing. We need to sound the alarm. This is not isolated pockets of activity. This is a larger comprehensive effort to go through that is trying to undermine our Constitution, our values, and slip us further and further towards authoritarian rule. And so I want to ask again, and I think it's really important, Ms. McCord, the legal work that you're involved in, and I just want to just to clarify this point I made about the declaring of national emergencies that are being done. First of all, the circumstances in Los Angeles and early Saturday, there was no clear following of the rule, and I think it's Title 10, Section 12406. It is a clear, if you read that statute, violation to be sending in the National Guard around the governor's office, correct?
Excuse me, the statute requires that orders to federalize the National Guard must be issued through the governor, and at least based on the governor's allegations in the lawsuit, he was bypassed.
And then I want to be respectful to my colleagues because my time is pretty much out, but for Americans to think that a president who violates the laws and the rights of marginalized people, that does not implicate them and their constitutional rights, could you do me a favor when it comes to his using trumped up reasons to declare national emergencies? If the president continues in this way, there are over 150 powers that become available to him, including things like suspending the Clean Air Act or taking possessions of certain lands for war purposes or shutting down domestic transportation. There's a scenario, do you think, where the president could declare an emergency and postpone or delay an election even. Is that correct?
Well, that's untested, but the emergency powers are capacious. I don't think Congress ever intended them to be that capacious. But this is, I think, an important point, as you indicate, because this is not all about non-citizens, right? This is about the impact of presidential action on all of us, including citizens, and our rights, our constitutional rights, including the right to vote.
And that's what I want to conclude on. Again, the courage, again, of Ms. Arias Cristobal, it's extraordinary. You are an extraordinary American, showing extraordinary courage. But I think the point I want to drive home here is if we do not show public outrage, he will continue to push to get away with things. That's why a lot of people that he has arrested and detained have been released actually because of the public outrage. This is a man that is saying it is unpatriotic, un-American to protest. When a president is violating the Constitution and the law of the land, to be silent is what is un-American. Patriotic is to show, being patriotic in a time like this is to show dissent, peaceful, lawful, but dissent is necessary if we were going to stop this president from his continued encroachments into the constitutional violations that he's doing. So I appreciate that. Thank you for the indulgence in that of my colleagues.
Thanks, Senator Booker.
On Senator Booker.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I want to just say that you had, Ms. Polyakova, you had a kind of a statement that I want to explore a little bit. You said Russia would be a sitting duck without the United States. It makes me concerned because I hear the president publicly flirting with indulging Russia's maximalist aims, and it seems to make me really, really alarmed. Last week, a Russian deputy foreign minister said that Ukraine won't end until NATO reduces or eliminates its military footprint in Eastern Europe across NATO's eastern flank. This includes Baltic states, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and so on. When I was in Estonia, their concerns for the U.S. alliance and partnership, especially under the Trump administration, had many people I talked with very alarmed. And so I'm wondering if you can expand on this line of thought and maybe impress upon this committee the urgency, the dire urgency of this moment we have right now before us with Russia and with a president whose posture at times really worries me.
Thank you so much, Senator Booker.
It is an urgent moment, as I outlined in my written testimony, mainly because Russia is on a war footing, and confrontation with NATO seems increasingly more inevitable unless the United States continues to take up a leadership position. NATO continues to deter and defend in the European theater. So Russia has, in fact, been the main obstacle to peace in Ukraine. President Putin's maximalist positions that he's not stepped away from, I think signal a very basic truth that we've learned over many administrations, that a reset with Russia doesn't get you anywhere. I think this administration has been learning that, in fact, and like other administrations have tried to reset with Russia. And I hope that they will pivot to a different strategy. That means that we need to apply pressure to the Russians to come to the table. Economic pressure, military pressure, and also pressure on their partners and allies that have been feeding Putin's war machine over the last several years. I hope that is the thinking that the administration is going to pursue the next several months, because obviously the incentive model has not worked to produce results.
And my staff corrected me for the record that I said Russia, but Europe would be a sitting duck. And so you said that your view of the Trump administration is that they understand the urgency for the American engagement and involvement. Am I right to assume that that's what you were implying?
To be frank, I don't know if that is the coherent view of everyone in the U.S. government and in the executive branch. I do think there are some, certainly, that understand the threat, yes.
It's very diplomatic of you. I want to shift in my remaining time and talk about sort of the Arctic strategy. I was really surprised on my visit last year to Iceland to understand the extent of the urgencies and the need for America to have a greater Arctic strategy and pay close attention to really what's happening in the Arctic right now. The shortest flight path between Russia and the United States is through the Arctic. The combination of melting ice caps, as you know, critical natural resources being removed and fought over, Russia's military buildup and increasing cooperation between Russia and China in the Arctic have really a lot of potential to increase tensions and expose a lot of the vulnerabilities in that area. Now, Sweden and Finland joining NATO provides to what I believe is just a great boost to the collective defense in the high north. Now, 7 of the 8 Arctic states are part of NATO, which is an incredible stride, I believe. Russia's ghost fleets that sabotage undersea cables and critical infrastructure to protecting strategic ports. I just believe we need to expand NATO's capabilities. Now, I'll tell you, I was hearing reports when I was there that the Chinese have been doing, pun intended, fishy things in that area. And so I'm wondering from both of you, what new and emerging capabilities should NATO be considering when it comes to protecting allied interests in the Arctic? And are there gaps, as you see them, in NATO's current approach to challenges in the Arctic?
I was hoping somebody would ask a question about the Arctic. I hope you might come with us again to the Arctic this August. I'll be in touch about that. That being said, you're absolutely right that we have a huge opportunity with the kind of strategic depth that Finland and Sweden joining the alliances provides us. Now we have a landmass connecting the Arctic Sea and the Baltic Sea, and we haven't quite understood what the opportunity there is to deter and defend. I think we have significant challenges in our logistics operations, communications that are well suited for that harsh environment that we haven't quite thought through. I think there's a huge amount more that we can do to ensure that we have a defense and security hub that is closely coordinated with the Nordic Baltic 8 grouping, that is closely coordinated with the NATO framework to position ourselves as the Arctic nation the United States is, and China is not in particular. The Chinese have for years seen significant interests emerge for themselves in the Arctic and have declared themselves a near polar or near Arctic nation, which of course they're not. And they're doing a lot through their proxies, the Russians now, to try to plant a flag and try to influence and undermine a strategic cohesion in the Arctic. But we have the upper hand there because now the 7 of the 8 Arctic states are NATO members, and we should take advantage of that. But I think exercises, number 1, logistics and comms, number 2, and then we can think about maybe positioning of some additional resources and kit in the region.
Mr. Rao?
You are right, Senator. This is a real opportunity. At the Madrid summit in 2022, the Arctic was mentioned for the first time in the NATO summit communique. In 2010, at the last time, or it's not the communique, the strategic the strategic compass, strategic policy document for the alliance. The last go round, the alliance could not agree because the Norwegians wanted more NATO. The Canadians wanted to keep this a national issue. We now have more consensus in the alliance, and we've seen the Nordic powers really begin to work more with one another as well. It's the first time since the Kalmar Union of the 16th century that all the Nordic powers are in one alliance, which is a real opportunity. And there I would just say that the Arctic Council is essentially dead, but the Arctic 7 are all in NATO, and we have capabilities that have now come on board. The Finns are world leaders in icebreaker design. They have all the Arctic powers, skills in cold weather operations. And I'd like to see us cooperate more also on Russian anti-submarine capabilities and exercises. The GI-UK gap is, of course, central here, where Russians from Murmansk try to break out from the Norwegian Sea into the Atlantic, where they can threaten the American Atlantic seaboard. And Tony Radakin, the Chief of Staff of the British Armed Forces, just a few years ago, right before the outbreak of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, described the phenomenal increase in Russian submarine activity. In April, General Kavoli, the SACEUR, testified similarly in front of the House Armed Services Committee. These are areas ripe for more cooperation. I'd like to see us work more with the Arctic 7 within the NATO alliance, and probably leave the Arctic Council, which of course includes Russia, in its latent state.
Thank you very much. That urgency is something I'd love the committee to focus a little bit more on. And I want to say I've never seen, Mr. Rao, I've never seen a witness throw my staff under the bus. They didn't put in my briefing document about the Arctic, the Kalmar Treaty of 16th century. I'm going to be on my staff very upset about that lack of in my briefing.
Well, what I am.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one point?
Yeah.
We know we are operating under a 5-minute rule, but you've given some latitude, for example, to the last senator, and I'm not objecting to it.
What did you say?
I'm saying the time to speak has been 5 minutes established. We've gone over that as a convenience to our colleagues, and I hope we'll continue that.
Okay.
In 2018, Mr. Bovee, a group of federal criminal defense attorneys and former SDNY prosecutors in Manhattan were so alarmed by your pattern of unethical conduct that they wrote your supervisors at SDNY to warn them about you. I'd like to enter into the record a letter that I sent to Acting U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton of SDNY requesting more information about any internal or external complaints about you as a prosecutor. The letter contains the full text of that 2018 email from lawyers in which they describe you, and I'm quoting here, they describe you as, quote, vindictive, always looking for leverage and power, a prosecutor version of a drunk driver, completely reckless and out of control, quote, needing adult supervision. One attorney said that you, whatever due justice is supposed to mean, it doesn't apply to Bovee. A former federal prosecutor who later litigated against you said what Mr. Bovee enjoyed most as a prosecutor was wielding power, a quality they described as the single worst possible trait for a public servant. Now, I read these because they're important, that these complaints are not an attempt to derail your nomination. This is from 2018, person after person. These complaints come from attorneys who practiced in federal court, some former federal prosecutors, warning a U.S. attorney's office that one of their prosecutors was, quote, a real recurring problem, and that you were not representing the office in a way that they thought the office would want it represented. Your conduct was so beyond the pale back in 2018 that they wrote your supervisors to say you were a liability for the office. I think this is important because it shows a pattern of behavior. The allegations align with reports about your abuse of power now at the DOJ. I want to follow up in this pattern with what Senator Durbin's questions about the mandatory Teams meeting you scheduled for all remaining public integrity section attorneys on February 14th, 2025. We already know that you're refusing to tell this committee whether you talked to Stephen Miller or others at the White House. All the chiefs and supervisors had resigned at this point, so all of the remaining and available attorneys were line attorneys in that meeting. Is that correct? Approximately 20 attorneys were on the team's call.
I do hope, Senator, that at some point I'll have an opportunity.
You were trying to find 2 attorneys to sign a motion to dismiss the Adams case without prejudice. Is that correct?
Yes.
During the meeting, you told attorneys that it is their job to implement the president's agenda and that they have to follow orders from the president and that there's no room for dissent in the chain of command. Is that correct?
No.
You told them that they had 1 hour to find 2 attorneys to sign the motion. They weren't allowed to ask questions. Is that correct?
No.
You started the meeting by emphasizing to the line attorneys that Danielle Sasson and Hagan Scott had failed to follow orders and that Ms. Sasson was going to be reassigned before she resigned, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last part of that question.
I will state again. You started the meeting by emphasizing to the line attorneys that Danielle Sasson and Hagan Scott had failed to follow orders and that Ms. Sasson was going to be reassigned before she resigned. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. You also told them that whoever signed the motion would, quote, emerge as the new leaders, end quote, of the public integrity section for doing so, correct?
I don't recall saying that.
So you don't know if you said that or not?
I don't recall saying that.
Edward Sullivan volunteered to sign the motion. As promised, Sullivan was promoted to acting chief of the public integrity section for dismissing that case. Is that correct?
No.
So you are saying that as the leader of the DOJ, you don't know who is in charge of public integrity?
No, I'm saying that the causal relationship that you implied in your question is not accurate.
Okay. We have you on the record on all of those points. You worked on January 6th cases while a prosecutor at the SDNY, correct?
A supervisor, yes.
An FBI agent described you as treating the January 6th cases as a priority when you were prosecuting those cases. But then you fired dozens of prosecutors and 8 senior FBI officials working on the case. Is that correct?
No.
So, Mr. Bove, I am hoping that more evidence is going to come out that showed that you lied before this committee. And I'm wondering where the lines are for you. What's the line in the sand when you wield awesome power of government? What is that line for you? Because clearly lying to a court isn't a red line. Referring to follow court or refusing to follow court orders isn't a line. Doxing judges and government officials isn't a red line. Intimidating attorneys you supervise into doing things they believe is unethical is not a line. So what's your red line? I really wonder. What could the president ask you to do that you wouldn't do? What wouldn't you do to win? A judge has to uphold core values and principles: independence, impartiality, integrity, diligence. A judge must be free from undue influence. A judge must decide cases fairly without prejudice or favor. A judge must ensure that anyone who appears before them in court will get a fair shake.
Thank you, Mr.
Everything
Booker.
we're hearing you say makes me believe that you're incapable of that. The pattern didn't just begin when you were nominated by this president. Peers of yours, prosecutors, attorneys who served with you, and judges in your past year have again and again cited you as someone who is not capable or qualified of doing this job in which you're nominated for. Thank you,
Ms.
Madam
Britt.
Chair.
Mr. Bove, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am really excited about the U.S. Greece relationship and the promise and the possibilities. I've been grateful, Ms. Guilfoyle, of what you've already discussed. Can we dive a little bit more deeply into some of the strategic importance of the work that we're doing and that we can build upon, I think, in the coming months with your leadership? Thank you. If you could put your microphone on, I appreciate that. So you mentioned the base in Alexandroupoli. Also, I want to mention the base at Suda Bay and how important they are to the U.S. Greece Mutual Defense Cooperation Agreement. And I'm wondering if the administration is planning to any upgrades to those existing bases, given their pivotal strategic importance in that region, as you already discussed, and you share the perspective that maintaining and increasing the capacity at Alexandropoli is important.
Yes, Senator, thank you for the question. It's nice to see you. I believe this is such an important relationship. The administration believes it as well. This is a post where we are dealing with EU, G20, a lot of complex issues geopolitically in that area. And I think it is incredibly important. Again, I am speaking now in the role of a private citizen. I would work in conjunction with the State Department, Senator Rubio, the deputy secretaries, and also following in the mission of American interests moving forward to make sure that we are ready in that area, that that relationship and partnership is maintained, that if there are necessary improvements or expenditures that need to be made, that I would advocate in that fashion very strenuously on behalf of the United States of America and the American people.
I am grateful for that. That's the kind of strength I want. The tradition in the ambassador to Greece we had with George Souness, who's probably the best bipartisan ambassador, and I'm sure you know.
My dear friend who is here today.
Yes, yes. I didn't want to call him out. He does not like attention. He's very shy.
He's Greek. I mean,
yeah.
Fake news.
Yes. Feristo, thank you. Let's continue. I have a lot of concerns about the Greek-Turkey tensions, and it's something I think all of us should be giving more attention to. When I visited Greece last year and had the pleasure of being with the ambassador for some time, there was really calm between Greece and Turkey, between Athens and Ankara. The Prime Minister of Greece and the President of Turkey met last year twice to try to reduce those tensions, but I am concerned that with regard to sovereignty challenges, maritime borders, those tensions exist and could be real points that get inflamed. Tell me about your concern, and I've heard from a lot of my constituents in the Greek diaspora as well as from my travels that it's critical, I believe, that the U.S. doesn't tolerate any threats to the sovereignty of our European allies, especially Greece.
Senator, again, thank you for the question. Yes, this is a very important issue, and I know there is a lot of concern from Greece, from Israel, from Cyprus, et cetera, regarding any increasing of weaponization in Turkey with the F-35s. Again, I'm speaking as a private citizen. I do not direct or maintain policy, but I know this is an area of concern to the administration as well. I know that President Trump is the best negotiator and diplomat to be able to engage with different countries to find meaningful ways to work together. I would like to make sure that we are protecting and honoring our strategic, consistent, stable and reliable allies with Greece. They have answered the call every time. They have exceeded our expectations. They have readily committed to the 3%, consistent in that regard, and Greece remains strong and proud as the 5th largest spender for military equipment
I'm going to interrupt you
in
there
the world.
I'm running out of time, but I want to say I thank you. I associate myself with a lot of that bravado when it comes to Greece, so thank you very much. I just want to say I've got some bipartisan work on really the importance of the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. It's really vital. I hope to be able to talk to you about that. I know you know the importance of that and how the 3+1 framework between Israel,
Yes.
Greece, and Cyprus work into that. But I want to shift in my remaining seconds really to talk to Ms. Blanchard. I'm really concerned about food security, and things are getting exponentially worse on our planet. It's estimated right now, unfortunately, the Trump administration's foreign assistance cuts have already resulted in over 63,000 children dying unnecessarily from hunger. This is heartbreaking. It's a violation of the decency and values of our country. The Rome-based UN Food and Agriculture Organization, the WFP, the FAO, the IFAD, these are critical tools to strengthen the resilience of vulnerable communities who are at risk of hunger. Hunger leads not to horrible death and that is deplorable, but it leads to instability that ultimately could affect our security. So if confirmed, how will you seek to advance the programs that address long-term food security challenges? How do you propose to do that if the U.S. is actually reducing its funding and commitment? And as you know, other nations watch us. When we reduce, they reduce. When we challenge them to do more, as I've done in a bipartisan way here in past years, they do more. And so what impact ultimately do you think the reduction in U.S. funding will have on food insecure countries and communities worldwide?
Senator, thank you for the question. As we all know, food security is bipartisan. We all are in agreement of that, but I do believe we're all in agreement as well of our accountability for our checkbooks. I mean, I account for things that go in and out of my checkbook at home, and I think it's wonderful to reevaluate, and I look forward to the reevaluation process. I personally, and I would never want to put words in the president's mouth, but the fact that he has nominated someone for this position is encouraging to me. I've worked for the last 20 years in helping orphans and the most vulnerable abroad in 12 different countries. I'm a believer in it. I realize it's national security, but I do also realize that there's been instances where malaligned players have gotten a hold of food and used it against us or our allies. So I certainly look forward to meeting with you and this whole committee
So
in the
I'm out of
future.
time. I want to be respectful. I just want to say this. When I was on the Chad-Sudan border, and I've never had a situation, I've visited refugee camps all around this world, where pleading Americans were begging me to up food assistance and were being very clear with me as I looked at malnourished babies of what would happen if we didn't increase food assistance. Well, we have done worse. We've limited funding, and I've now heard directly about the children that have died there. There is a moral urgency that I know reflects deeply within your faith tradition and my faith tradition. I beg of you publicly, when it comes to crises like we're seeing in Sudan, to please be a call of conscience to this administration, should you be confirmed, to please demand in private that we step up to American tradition and the moral urgency that has been supported in a bipartisan way. We are watching children die at rates that should stun the conscience of Americans, and I'm hoping that you can help us to address that crisis. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Rush.
Thank you. Ms. Guilfoyle, I want to drill down a little bit more into the issues between Greece and Turkey.
Certainly.
You know, they're both NATO allies, and I have to tell you, I've started to use that word.
To talk to Ms. Blanchard, I'm really concerned about food security, and things are getting exponentially worse on our planet. It's estimated right now, unfortunately, the Trump administration's foreign assistance cuts have already resulted in over 63,000 children dying unnecessarily from hunger. This is heartbreaking. It's a violation of the decency and values of our country. The Rome-based UN Food and Agriculture Organization, the WFP, the FAO, the IFAD, these are critical tools to strengthen the resilience of vulnerable communities who are at risk of hunger. Hunger leads not just to horrible death and that is deplorable, but it leads to instability that ultimately could affect our security. So if confirmed, how will you seek to advance the programs that address long-term food security challenges? How do you propose to do that if the U.S. is actually reducing its funding and commitment? And as you know, other nations watch us. When we reduce, they reduce. When we challenge them to do more, as I've done in a bipartisan way here in past years, they do more. And so what impact ultimately do you think the reduction in U.S. funding will have on food insecure countries and communities worldwide?
Senator, thank you for the question. As we all know, food security is bipartisan. We all are in agreement of that, but I do believe we're all in agreement as well of our accountability for our checkbooks. I mean, I account for things that go in and out of my checkbook at home, and I think it's wonderful to reevaluate, and I look forward to the reevaluation process. I personally, and I would never want to put words in the president's mouth, but the fact that he has nominated someone for this position is encouraging to me. I've worked for the last 20 years in helping orphans and the most vulnerable abroad in 12 different countries. I'm a believer in it. I realize it's national security, but I do also realize that there's been instances where malaligned players have gotten a hold of food and used it against us or our allies. So I certainly look forward to meeting with you and this whole committee
So
in the future.
I'm out of time. I want to be respectful. I just want to say this. When I was on the Chad-Sudan border, and I've never had a situation, I've visited refugee camps all around this world, where pleading Americans were begging me to up food assistance, and were being very clear with me as I looked at malnourished babies of what would happen if we didn't increase food assistance. Well, we have done worse. We've limited funding, and I've now heard directly about the children that have died there. There is a moral urgency that I know reflects deeply within your faith tradition and my faith tradition. I beg of you publicly, when it comes to crises like we're seeing in Sudan, to please be a call of conscience to this administration, should you be confirmed, to please demand in private that we step up to American tradition and the moral urgency that has been supported in a bipartisan way. We are watching children die at rates that should stun the conscience of Americans, and I'm hoping that you can help us to address that crisis. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Risch.
Thank you. Ms. Guilfoyle, I want to drill down a little bit more into the issues between Greece and Turkey.
Certainly.
You know, they're both NATO allies.
Congressman Waltz, I've watched this hearing, and I've been really disappointed. And what's been troubling to me about your nomination from the beginning is your failure to just stand up and take accountability for mistakes that you made and that all Americans know that you've made. Everyone in this room, every one of us has made mistakes, but what America expects from leaders, especially leaders who are tasked with our national security or could be tasked with the position for which you're nominated for, is for people to stand up and just take responsibility, take accountability. But I heard you just blame Biden. I've seen you not only fail to stand up, but lie. You said about this person when you were involved in the sharing of sensitive information about imminent military operations. I've listened to you now for weeks and months. You said this journalist intentionally infiltrated that signal chain. You said that he was sucked in. You denied, deflected, and then you did something that to me really lacks integrity, is that you sought out to demean and degrade that very journalist in crass and frankly cruel ways that made him a target. That's not leadership. When you blame people that tell the truth, that's not leadership. When you can't say the words, I made a mistake, I could have done better, I learned valuable lessons from this experience. Instead, at a moment where our national security was clearly compromised, you denied, you deflected, and then you demeaned and degraded those people who objectively told the truth and criticized your actions. Smearing people, attacking folks, singling them out, just furthers, it compounds what I think is disqualifying about you for this position. It also, to me, just shows profound cowardice. You should step up right now. I heard Senator Coons. I heard you being asked by Senator Kaine again and again to simply say, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I take responsibility for my actions. Unfortunately, what you're doing to me is perfectly in line with the way this administration as a whole has operated. I've never seen an administration that has made no mistakes, can't learn constructively from things they did wrong, has no sense of self-interrogation or integrity. And should they be criticized legitimately, they go on the attack. We have too much of that rhetoric, that divisive, demeaning, degrading, cruelness that's being elevated and celebrated by this administration that you seem to fall in line with. I just watched with great disappointment that even after weeks, if not months of reflection, you couldn't sit before this committee and take some responsibility and talk constructively about what's learned. Instead, you do what seems to be yet another creative tool that people are doing, which is, hey, let me just blame Biden. I want to take another moment to discuss concerns I have with this administration's approach to the United Nations and its dealings with African countries. Every country in the UN gets one vote in the General Assembly, no matter how large or small it is. So diplomacy and staffing at our State Department and their embassies really matter, but this administration has fired over 1,350 staff at the State Department, including whole offices that spearheaded multilateral affairs. Sub-Saharan Africa has alone, the member states have 49 votes. I've watched how China has done everything they can to court support at the United Nations and how we wonder why are so many countries voting against us. And I truly believe, and I've said this to the Secretary of State, that we need to start prioritizing African nations, start focusing on what I believe is urgently within our national interests, if not our national security interests. It seems to me that we are ceding and surrendering sub-Saharan Africa to China, who is stepping up more and more and filling in the void of our leadership. So I have no questions for you, sir. I have nothing but deep disappointment in what I consider a failure of leadership on your part. God, America needs now more than ever, forget the partisanship, just people to step up and show heart and integrity and honor. When you lie, defer, deflect, demean, and degrade journalists, to me, it's absolutely unacceptable. I have no questions. I cannot support your nomination. I think you've shown a failure of leadership at a time that America especially needs people of honor to stand up and show what leadership actually is.
Senator Scott.
Senator Booker. Yeah, we're good.
I cannot tell you how frustrated I am listening to the answers that you've given here that to me are utterly unacceptable. You know that there's a number of us who have served in executive positions. We have governors, county executive, as Coons has said. I ran a city during a recession, cut 25% from my workforce overall. I know what it means to do a RIF right, but this has been chaos. It has been cruelty. And your answers, frankly, have just lacked decency, as if you don't care about a lot of the employees whose lives have been destroyed after years, if not decades, of service. Now, I want to be very specific. Clearly, you're not standing up for people who've dedicated their lives to this country, but I'm going to stand up for them. And so let's talk about some of these people in real life and what you've done. A technical security specialist who just moved all of his belongings to Pakistan. He was fired as he was heading there to ensure our embassies in the region were safe. Hours after the movers left his home, he was fired, leaving a massive security gap of this administration's making. On Friday, you fired rapid response consular officers who deployed to provide emergency services for Americans overseas. The rapid response officers you fired were both actively deployed, leaving one stranded in Colombia and the other in Ankara without access to their emails or phones and without plane tickets home. The cruelty continues. One of the officers was a veteran with 24 years of federal service who had helped Americans during the Afghanistan withdrawal and the Sudan evacuation, that deserve better from you and the United States government for their service. At a time that there's a hot war in Ukraine, and President Trump is claiming to try to foster a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, you fired the only Ukraine intelligence analyst and Russia analysts in the Intelligence and Research Bureau. You fired the executive director of the National Authority for Chemical Weapons Convention while we are trying to get the new government in Syria to locate and destroy remaining stockpiles of chemical weapons that threaten the security of that region and us. You fired human trafficking experts, including everyone with human trafficking experience in the Middle East, North Africa, and South and Central Asia, as if that is not an urgent crisis amongst humanity and for this nation. Apart from the national security implications of all of these firings, despite the cruel way that you guys executed them, the human toll is also staggering. One of the human trafficking experts you fired, showing the level of cruelty of your actions, has a wife who was just fired by USAID. She's pregnant. And now he just got fired as well. Two people trying to start their family with no income and now even their health insurance in limbo, who gave years of service to this country. You even fired all the staff at the Office of Casualty Assistance who are charged with repatriating fallen State Department personnel and their families, including those working on behalf of employees killed in the Benghazi attacks. We have a solemn and sacred duty to bring home bodies of American citizens who die while serving their countries and helping their and help their families. It's a sacred obligation. Every major corporation I know, we've talked about business sector, knows that the most valuable thing they can do is get a pipeline of talent and personnel. I've talked to CEOs who've told me they spend between 25% and a third of their time recruiting talent. But despite telling us that the recruitment office would face no cuts, on Friday you fired the entire recruitment division, lying to us and eliminating that pipeline of talent. To the civil service and foreign officers who are watching this right now, hoping they can get some justification for the chaos you've created, for the cruelty you've put into place, for the lack of decency, I'm going to tell those folks right now that we are going to stand up for each and every one of those folks and fight for them at a time that China is doubling down on their investments in diplomatic corps, trying to fill every void that we create. You are devastating our corps, hurting Americans, undermining our sacred mission as well. And again, I don't trust you, Mr. Regas. Yesterday you said no one at Council Affairs would be fired. That's false. Over 100 Council Affairs officers were fired. Again, you said no one with overseas assignments would be fired. That also is not true. I have examples of employees riffed all over this country who've had orders in hands. And we were told no diplomatic security agents would be fired. And again, not true. We are the United States Senate. We have an obligation for oversight, and you showed over the House hearing that even your statements lack veracity. I'm telling you right now, we are in a crisis in this country if you won't come here and represent facts. And to demonstrate that cruelty, to demonstrate the level of chaos and lack of decency of this administration, all of these cuts are being done in the name of saving taxpayers' money, but we're not doing that. We literally are giving tax cuts to billionaires and racking up the biggest deficits in my lifetime under this leadership that does not have fiscal responsibility. And the best demonstration of that is allowing millions of pounds or thousands of pounds of food that were supposed to save the lives of thousands of human beings, paid for by taxpayers, to spoil on docks. How is that in any way human decency? How is that in any way showing what we stand for as a country, that we would rather watch food spoil on the docks, taxpayer money absolutely wasted, while children around this world are dying because of your inaction and that of your agency? Sir, you have not been truthful. You are showing a lack of decency to people who've given decades of service, veterans. You've upended families. This is not the way we operate. It is not the decency that they deserve. And I will stand up and fight you in every way to make sure that the people you have hurt get from this country what they deserve: respect and honor. Thank you.
Senator Shaheen.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, you may.
I am deeply distressed by everything you just said.
I'm distressed by everything you've done, sir. I've watched you lie to this committee. I've watched you lie on the House side.
You did not.
I'm sorry, sir.
If you were here when I addressed Senator Merkley on that consular affairs statement, I told him immediately after that, the next sentence after that in my House testimony, I
What about the other lies that I've said? I've pointed out. What about the other lies?
Diplomatic.
You want to go through them one by one?
Diplomatics, sir. Mr. Chairman, can I respond to the question?
You may respond.
We did not let go any diplomatic security personnel that were engaged in law enforcement functions. We did not let go any consular affairs personnel who were engaged in adjudicating passports. Mr. Chairman, can I answer the question, please? This is outrageous.
Senator Brooke, could you please let...
Sir, what is outrageous is your behavior.
So I will tell you, we gave humanitarian exceptions.
Senator, please let Mr. Regas respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We let individuals who are RIFed, by the way, they're still on payroll, they're still getting pay and benefits, civil servants for the next 60 days, foreign service officers for the next 120 days, and then the other individuals who had requested compassionate exceptions because of medical or family issues were granted. And I can tell you that is in stark contrast to what I experienced when I was the acting director of the Office of Personnel Management at the end of the first Trump administration, when we requested of the incoming Biden administration that appointees who were pregnant, who had babies, Some in the NICU, we said, could they please, because they were legally entitled to have family and medical leave for 12 weeks, sir.
Is to blame
for 12
Biden.
weeks.
I've heard this time and time
No, you
again.
have
Is
not.
to blame
You've
Biden.
never heard
Sir,
this before, sir, because it's never been
You are
entered into
trying
the
to
congressional
you're
record.
trying to delay.
I would like
You're
the
trying to
ability to
deny,
respond.
and you're trying to denigrate this committee by not telling the truth. Sir, I want to enter the record literally an impeachment of what he just said. May I enter into the record this document demonstrating that he did indeed fire people who were in charge of doing technical work for the security of our people overseas. You lied to this committee.
I did not,
and
sir.
I'd
I
like
just
to enter
told
this
you.
into the record.
Okay, just a minute. Senator Booker, you are allowed to enter it on the record.
Thank you very much.
So if we could, Mr. Regas, please respond, and then we're going to move on.
I pointed out 4 factual errors where you lied to this
not,
committee.
sir.
I'm happy to listen to you go through each one.
As I've said repeatedly
Senator Booker,
in this
thank
committee, sir,
you. I just want to allow Mr.
Thank
Regas to respond, and then Senator Shaheen then has a couple more
Thank
questions.
you.
We'll wrap
So,
up.
as I've said repeatedly during this committee, and maybe you weren't here to hear that testimony, obviously people were let go from their jobs. It's a reduction in force. We had 13 people who were let go. That does not mean the function that they performed was necessarily eliminated. These functions that we wanted to move forward were carried on either in a combined bureau or in another office where those redundant functions were carried out. We said diplomatic security that was conducting law enforcement, there were no reductions in that law enforcement function. Consular affairs folks who were adjudicating passports, who were doing the customer service work that we want to see continue, were not reduced or eliminated. People who were in domestic positions is where these reductions in force were done.
But, sir, he's contradicting his own territory. You said that's regrettable, that there were at least 200 people that you at least showed some shred of decency.
I'm saying it's regrettable. Look, no one wants...
So you've made mistakes.
No, I'm saying...
Sir, so you have made mistakes.
What I'm
made no
expressing,
mistakes.
sir...
You're literally saying you've made no mistakes.
Senator Booker, thank you. I want to, Mr. Regas, clearly this is going to go back and forth
Right.
here. So I'd like you to maybe respond maybe in 30 seconds, and we'll have Senator Shaheen.
I think you should respond to questions for the record, sir.
Thank you.
I'm happy to
he's
respond
speaking
to
on the
questions.
record.
Look, look, no one wants to lay someone off. I don't think we take any joy in laying people off or any kind of reduction in force, but we have to do what's best for the mission. We have to do what's best for the organization. The department has grown by 20,000 people since 2008. We're literally we let go 1,300 people. Every single one of those is hard for those individuals, for their families. You know, I've experienced unemployment in my life. I know what that's like. It's not pleasant for anyone, but we have to put the mission first, and we have to make sure the critical functions we want to execute are going to be done, and they're going to be done with respect to taxpayers in the United States. So
I find that insulting, demeaning, degrading to the people whose lives you've upended unjustifiably.
Yeah.
To put yourself out there.
Senator Shaheen, next round of question.
Thank you very much, Chairman Grassley. This process with Emil Bovee started with my office as well as Senator Andy Kim saying to the White House we were willing to work with them to find someone. The President of the United States, or the White House counsel, completely violated the process we had agreed upon and thrust this judge onto the state of New Jersey, a candidate, a nominee, who we had already written letters of complaint about for his role in the prosecutor's office around issues around January 6th. Bovee directed Ed Martin to fire the January 6th defendants. And that was something we were actively investigating before he was even being considered as this. Imagine any senator here having somebody put in as a circuit court nominee in their state when there is an active investigation going on about something as serious as the January 6th nominations. That is something that everybody here would consider a violation of process. Now, I understand that there are folks here in good faith who are looking for issues and understanding, but we should all know we have an obligation, a duty, constitutional duty, to advise and consent that requires full and fair consideration. At this moment, there are still unanswered questions surrounding this nominee, evidence and data coming out, at least one whistleblower who's come forward. Moving forward with this vote before this committee has addressed these issues and concerns would undermine the integrity of this process. Mr. Bovee's answers at his hearing and questions for the record raised serious questions as to whether he actually misled this committee, even lied to this committee. Multiple members of this committee have pending requests for critical information regarding Mr. Bovee that must be fulfilled for us to responsibly and thoroughly evaluate this person's qualifications for a lifetime appointment on the federal bench. Let's start with a credible whistleblower who came forward with texts and emails that show that Mr. Bovee said F you to the courts and instructed federal officials to ignore a court order. The whistleblower is a 15-year career lawyer at the DOJ who served in Republican and Democratic administrations and defended the Trump administration's immigration policies during the first term. This is hardly someone that lacks credibility and legitimacy. And he came forward in a climate that we all know. When folks like this come forward, they are targeted with hate, with threats. Yet this person who has such integrity and such experience daringly, courageously stepped forward. And this committee won't even hear from him? I'm hard-pressed to believe that someone who dedicated 15 years to public service would jeopardize their career, the safety of themselves and their families for no reason. After learning that in 2018, members of the federal defense bar in SDNY, many of whom were former prosecutors, took the unprecedented step in 2018 of alerting Mr. Bovee's supervisors of his unethical conduct. These are Democrats and Republicans, former federal prosecutors. Many of my colleagues and I on this committee requested information from the SDNY about any internal or external complaints against him during this tenure. And after weeks of outreach, we haven't gotten any response. Just yesterday did the DOJ respond only to refuse to honor the request, and yet we're moving forward. This committee is moving forward without all of these former prosecutors, federal defenders, their legitimate claims being heard. Finally, after receiving credible information, I sent a letter to Mr. Bovee requesting that he explain his role in reviewing and withholding information about the Epstein files. That's something that should be basic for this committee. Just give us the information. He held a leadership role at the Department of Justice since the beginning of the Trump administration after months of public statements about, quote unquote, truckloads of documents in the Epstein files. The DOJ and the FBI suddenly decided that there's no need to do any kind of disclosures. There's nothing to see here. Look away. Which one is it? The public has a right to know, and a person being nominated for one of the highest courts in our land who clearly played a role in this matter of grave national concern, including child sex trafficking, we should know what he knew and what he did in this matter. I've requested responses to these questions by 9 a.m. this morning, and we have heard nothing as a committee. And yet we're moving forward. Time and time again, there are relevant allegations made against this nominee by independent people, by Republicans, by career professionals, and we are not listening to them or demanding answers. These unanswered questions strike at the very core of whether Bovee is fit for a lifetime appointment on the federal bench. Does he respect the rule of law? They raise the alarming possibility that he deliberately lied and concealed critical information to this committee. Mr. Chairman, there are federal prosecutors who held accountable those who attacked the U.S. Capitol and assaulted law enforcement on January 6th. I'm grateful for my colleagues on both sides of the aisle talking about the severity of this issue. Federal prosecutors, career professionals, have raised strong reservations about Mr. Bovee, who had undermined their legitimate work to hold accountable people who did the most horrific acts of violence. Listen to these folks who are law enforcement professionals and what they're saying about Mr. Bovee. Several of these prosecutors reached out to my Republican colleagues on this committee to share their grave concerns, but not one of them were met with by anyone on the other side of the aisle, not even to listen to these prosecutors who did their job, who faithfully served the rule of law, who were instruments and agents of justice. One would expect that their concerns should be heard. But unfortunately, not one meeting, almost as if they don't want to hear the truth or the facts or the details. How can you say you were concerned about what happened on January 6th and you won't listen to the people who spent months and months and months prosecuting those cases? How does that make sense? To not even want to hear from these folks who have legitimate concerns, who've expressed grave concerns. I don't understand why we are willfully refusing to hear the legitimate concerns, not of politicians, not of elected officials, but of career folks, many of them Republicans, who've expressed grave concerns. One group literally said, and this isn't from the time that Trump nominated him, this is before he even served in the Department of Justice. A group of lawyers, federal prosecutors and defendants said that he is the prosecutorial version of a drunk driver. He is reckless and dangerous. And have we asked to hear from those folks? Here's a guy that was given the worst ever condemnation from a judge in the SDNY for withholding exculpatory evidence as a prosecutor. There are former prosecutors on this committee. Imagine that kind of flaunting of the rule of law. The grave ethical violations in that case. Imagine that we are about to put that person now to be a judge. That is stunning to me. There is no need to vote on this nominee today. It is a false urgency. My guess is the White House has issued orders to move this along as quickly as possible. Don't let these independent arbiters with legitimate insight into this nominee's qualifications, don't let them be heard. Dear God, we are hearing that there are other whistleblowers who are wondering if they should come forward. We're hearing that they are afraid to come forward. They have lawyered up, and we better get this thing through as quickly as possible before other people come through. With more time, we would get more answers. With more time, the things that Mr. Bovee has done at the DOJ and throughout his career would come to light, not by elected officials, but by legitimate people whose voices should be heard. Why are we refusing to hear them? Why are we silencing those people? It's going to get harder and harder for my colleagues to ignore the truth, so let's rush these things through. But let's hear a little bit of the truth. Mr. Chairman, I want to submit a number of letters into the record. First, an opposition letter of current and former state and federal prosecutors from around the country. These prosecutors state, quote, Bovee not only refused to hold accountable those who attacked our nation's capital and attempted to block our democratic process on January 6th, but he punished and dismissed career Justice Department employees who investigated and prosecuted that insurrection. Another letter I'd like to submit from almost 1,000 former DOJ prosecutors. This is unprecedented that almost 1,000 former DOJ prosecutors would write this committee and say that they are alarmed, quote, by DOJ's leadership's recent deviations from constitutional principles and institutional guardrails. They identified Mr. Bovee as the leader in this assault. They say it is intolerable to us that anyone who disgraces the Department of Justice would be promoted to one of the highest courts in the land. And the third letter I'd like to submit is from 75 former federal and state judges, including a former Third Circuit judge who was appointed by President Bush. Jurists are writing. This is what they say: elevating a nominee whose record reflects a pattern of misconduct, disregard for lawful authority, and political entanglement would not only compromise the integrity of the courts, it would set a dangerous precedent that judicial power may be wielded in the service of personal fealty rather than constitutional duty. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit a letter from former federal prosecutors who have collectively more than 450 years of experience trying cases. These former federal prosecutors, 450 of them, urge There is only one way this committee can determine whether Mr. Bovee has violated a court order. It's by hearing the testimony of Mr. Revenet, the whistleblower. Failure to take the time now to do so before voting on this nomination will forever brand this decision as rubber stamping. Mr. Chairman, I make a request, and as I understand the rules of this committee, I have the right to do that. Mr. Revenet witnessed the DOJ leadership plan to defy court orders. I would like to say, ask under Rule 4 of this Rules of the Committee, that the chairman is required to entertain a non-debatable motion to bring a matter before the committee for a vote. I'm making a motion to bring this matter to a vote. I request a roll call of this committee so that the record may show that where each member stands on allowing a whistleblower, an independent prosecutor who worked in Democrat and Republican administrations for 15 years, who courageously stepped forward, who put his life at risk, who is being threatened right now, who felt like it was worth to come forward to speak to this committee. I'd like to request that before voting on this nominee, we would hear from this nominee. I'd like a roll call vote on that according to Rule 4 of this committee.
The clerk will call the roll. Well, before you call the roll, first of all, I do believe that it's not on the agenda what you've requested, and we won't, things that I haven't previewed ahead of time or on the agenda, so I'm going to rule you out of order.
But sir, we can, in all sincerity, we could take the time. We could set the whistleblower coming next week. It would give us more time and then enough time to review all of the things that you're concerned about. The level of gravity of the charges of an independent prosecutor for 15 years who literally has put his life on the line by coming forward. We could do the necessary work to prepare for such a hearing, to hear from this prosecutor.
Before I call on Senator Whitehouse, let me say that you requested put things in the record. We will grant that request. Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Let me. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to address your comments in a moment, but I ask the leave of the committee for a point of personal privilege. I want to acknowledge a member of my staff who's leaving. Yashi Gunawardena has served on my staff for over 4 years, personal office and committee, worn many hats, including serving as a professional staff member and nominations clerk. She's excelled in every role. Early on in her time with us, Yashi worked on Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearing. If you're a federal judge who's come before us in the past year, it's safe to say that Yashi played a key role in your confirmation. She also works on protecting reproductive rights, an issue she's passionate about. Although she's leaving D.C., she isn't going too far. Next month, she'll begin law school at the University of Virginia. Please join me in thanking Yashi for her service to the committee. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for your statement at the outset of this hearing as well about last week's markup. We were surprised by the amount of time we were given to discuss the 10 nominees. I remember expressly what you did say, that you wanted to call the roll at 10:30. You made that point early on. I didn't know if that was a hard and fast rule, but you did say it. I will acknowledge that point. I want to address the claim that this was based on precedent. The precedent for cutting off debate and overriding committee rules by a majority was established by 3 Republican chairmen, Chairman Hatch, who in 2003 cut off debate on 2 judicial nominees, yourself in 2018, cutting off the debate on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court, Chairman Graham, who in 2019 cut off debate on a partisan immigration bill, and 2020 cut off debate on Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. I believe what happened last week was different from what I did in 2023 when I cut off debate on 2 district court nominees. In that case, the nominees were on the markup for the 4th time. They had already had nearly 2 hours of debate on the nominees, and every member of the committee had already had an opportunity to speak. In fact, we'd already voted on the nominees, and the only reason we came back was one of our members from Minnesota stepped off the floor at an inopportune moment and then came back on the floor and tried to register her vote in person. And we weren't certain that that would stand up to the test of whether it was a valid roll call, and we started over for another go-around. During my 4 years as chair of this committee, I provided members on both sides of the aisle with ample time to debate before calling votes. The bottom line is this. The Senate parliamentarian has been clear that a chairman can override committee rules by a vote of the majority of the committee. Both Republican and Democratic chairs have done that in the past. I think each of us would say that we did not relish it, but this committee has a long tradition of robust debate, and I especially appreciate your comments about trying to recognize that precedent in your own administration as chairman. I understand our staffs have sat down in a peaceful way and talked this over, and I'm looking forward to respecting the fact that we all have busy schedules, that we still have ample time to debate these lifetime appointments, because that's an important part of our responsibility. I thank you. I'm going to withhold my statement beyond that point, and so that we can move on.
Now, if I could explain proceeding today, by agreement with the minority, we'll first voice vote all U.S. attorneys except for Pirro, and we'll do that en bloc. After a voice vote, I'll open the floor for debate on the nomination of Dean Pirro.
Mr. Chairman?
Before her roll call vote. After the Pirro vote, we'll proceed to the bills. So we'll now voice.
Mr. Chairman?
May I say something about the comments of the ranker and the chair on that matter of last week?
I hope you can do it quickly. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, both you and the ranking member said that the cutting off of debate had been done a handful of times. It was not relished by either the majority, when it was a Republican majority or Democratic majority. But the sentence that was said by both you and the ranking member was that you can end debate with a majority vote. I think what I said to you in a private conversation that I appreciate, and what I want to just say here is that's not how it was done last week. We didn't have a vote. And that's what I was asking for time and time again during that episode. So clearly, I know the rules. Clearly, I've checked with the parliamentarian. We can override the rules of the committee, but there should be a vote. You began to call a vote, but then you were cut off by staff, and then we pushed the vote through. And the reason why it upsets me so much is because the debate was on a judge for my state on the Third Circuit. We've created a climate in this country that is deepening and deepening a reflexive tribalism where people aren't interested in listening to the facts anymore, listening to each other. Tribalism kills curiosity. It kills the will to listen with an open heart or open mind to your opposition, even if you disagree with them or think you'll disagree with them. That's something that this committee, I think, needs to foster. I am very troubled this last month because I've seen people who want to come forward with things on this nominee, but they are so terrified of being doxxed or targeted or threatened or worse. The rising tide of hate, both of us on both of our parties have seen this. Judges in my district that are taking extra steps to protect themselves. The climate is getting so bad. I want to say to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that this culture of fear is affecting our ability to deliberate and do our job. A whistleblower came here to this committee with information that was disregarded. There is another person that's come forward to me through their attorneys. And so I just ask my colleagues, if you believe that, do you believe that a nominee who is not truthful under oath before this committee should not be confirmed? Do you believe that a nominee that comes before this committee that is not forthcoming and truthful should be confirmed? Do you believe that understanding the intent of a question requires a nominee to answer it honestly and not try to evade the question because they understand the intent of the question? If you believe these things, and since we can't have debate here, but before this person comes to the floor, on the record, I want to invite people to come to talk to me, and I will provide you with substantive information that should have been discussed in this hearing, clearly is not. Clearly, we can't have debate, but we have substantive information relevant to the truthfulness of this nominee, and I'm hoping more of my colleagues in this climate of fear and intimidation and rushed votes would want to know the truth before the final vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to respond to you. You and I had a private conversation, and I'm not going to say anything that you said, but it was a fruitful conversation as far as I'm concerned after our last meeting. But remember, one of the things that I told you was that we had this conflict with other committees. And remember that I told you that you got to have 100 senators together to solve this country's problems. Now, there's enough work for an individual senator to do 7 days a week if he wants to. But you're never going to solve this country's problems just working 2.5 days a week like we did under Schumer and now under Thune. We got to get this back on a 5-day work week, Monday through Friday, like it was the first 25 years I served in the United States Senate. We'd start at 10 on Monday and go to 4 on Friday. And then you don't have to have all of these meetings coming on a Thursday afternoon or a Thursday morning because you got more days to do it. I always had an agreement with Senator Hatch when he was chairman of the Judiciary Committee, or chairman of the Finance Committee, and I was chairman of this committee, that we wouldn't be having our meetings on the same day because we worked it out. Now, that was still a very short week, but if we'd put in more time here, we wouldn't have to have these meetings all going at the same time. So why don't you talk to Schumer and I'll talk to Thune about working a 5-day week.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, I've only had 14 years here. You were one of the best people I've had to work with over those 14 years, because as I said, as last week's proceedings were going on, I feel like I know you, and I appreciate what you said, and I actually agree with you 100%, and I especially like when Chuck Grassley gets cantankerous, because that's the best Chuck Grassley. So I just want to say I'm not arguing with any of that, and I appreciate it. I'm just simply saying that I feel like it's killing me that on this nominee, there is evidence that the nominee misled the committee, and I have not even gotten a chance for my colleagues to listen to the evidence, and that's what frustrates me. But sir, I cannot tell you, I appreciated our private conversation and the 14 years we've had of working together, and I'm hoping that we can do a better job moving forward.
Now, I'm hoping that we can move the way I suggested. We'll let anybody debate all they want to about Janine Pirro, but we'd now move to en bloc votes by voice on Kurt Almy, Nicholas Chase, Leslie Wood Murphy, Daniel Rosen, Eric Siebert, and Kurt Wall. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. No. These people will be reported.
Mr. Chairman, can I be recorded no on all of these? I'd like to be recorded no.
I'd like to be recorded as well as a no.
I heard Booker. I hear from.
I'd like to be recorded as a no vote on Kurt Almy,
Who
Leslie
was the
Murphy,
third one?
and Kurt Wall, and Nicholas Chase.
Oh, just on specific ones?
Yes.
Booker's on all of them, right?
And I would like to be recorded as no on all.
On all of them, okay. And you?
I'd like to be recorded as a no vote on Kurt Almy, Leslie Murphy, Kurt Wall, and Nicholas Chase.
Okay.
And I wanted to give a brief statement on my nominee.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
please.
Mr. Chairman,
if
I could on the recorded vote, unless this is on the.
On all of them, Senator Schiff?
No, on individual ones, if this is the appropriate time, or after Senator Klobuchar.
98, say aye.
Mr. Grassley? Mr. Grassley?
Where?
I'm sorry, I was trying to be recognized.
Go ahead.
Yes. First of all, I want to express at the top a lot of frustration that the DOJ is scraping money back from some states. I've made this point multiple times, but it is very frustrating to me that my state is being denied these type of grants while other states are. We're seeing a big frustration across New Jersey that very thoughtful grants that could be saving lives and being substantively helpful are being denied. And with that frustration, I want to call up an amendment. I'd like to call up my amendment number ALL 25698. Mr. Chairman, this amendment would allow S 1098 to take effect on the date when the Attorney General makes public all unclassified files, flight logs, correspondence, and evidence related to Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and their associates. The Department of Justice, we know clearly, has lied to the American people one way or another. Attorney General Bondi said that there were truckloads of evidence from the Epstein files and the Epstein list, leading people to believe that there was criminal activity that they had evidence of. I know Bovee, who we're talking about, was part of this. We found out yesterday that the president is mentioned several times in the Epstein files, and he was briefed on it back in May when he said he was not told that. Then in July, suddenly the DOJ and the FBI said there was nothing additional to disclose. So what's the lie? That there are truckloads of evidence and this DOJ is protecting those associates with this horrific crime? That Mr. Bovee, a Third Circuit nominee, is part of that cover-up? Or is the lie that there is nothing there at all? Let's just find out. This is simply asking for disclosure and transparency, and I'd like to offer that amendment.
Mr. Chair, parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chair, down here.
Yes, call the roll.
But we clarify, without a discussion on the second-degree amendment?
Don't call the roll yet.
Without discussion or debate
On the, you
on
just,
the motion?
Go ahead, sir.
I don't want to jump over the ranking member.
I'll defer.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
I'm reading that Cornyn second degree, and he said a lot of really important things about immigration that are worthy to be discussed. And I'm happy to vote on an immigration bill. I disagree with the death penalty. I will vote my conscience on this. But I want to draw everybody's attention to the first two lines of your second degree. They have nothing to do about immigration. They have nothing to do with the death penalty. I've never seen this before. His first two lines is not to bring up this important issue that should be discussed, debated. Your first two lines are to strike my amendment in its entirety. So what we have right here is hidden behind real issues on immigration is really just trying to not vote on the important points that we brought up about transparency and accountability on the Jeffrey Epstein files. This is not an amendment to my amendment. This is an attempt to strike what I have a whole list of prominent Republicans, elected leaders, who want the same thing I want, which is just to have transparency on this matter.
Can we vote
I've
on my
heard some of the
second degree?
comments, if I can finish, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I have heard public statements by my Senate colleagues on both sides of the aisle. I've heard comments from Republicans on the House side and Democrats on the House side that we want transparency and accountability on a matter of public safety. Senator Cornyn said that Jeffrey Epstein's dead yet, but his victims are not. There are women who have horrific stories of vile violence that was committed against them. We have Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, who said that there is evidence, truckloads of it, as to these crimes, potential co-conspirators, potential others involved. How can we not want to just know what happened? Why are we trying to simply turn away from the highest law enforcement officers in the land, from our FBI director to our attorney general, who spoke towards crimes committed and others involved in those crimes? Why are we considering an amendment that is hiding behind real immigration issues, but real intent is to strike a simple request for transparency, for accountability, that Republican voices all across the spectrum have been demanding from this president and this attorney general. So if Senator Cornyn is going to offer an amendment, I'm going to offer a third degree that simply strikes his first two lines. I'll vote on your immigration stuff that you so strongly stated. There was the importance of this, but you hid the fact that you put here the real intention of your amendment. It has nothing to do with immigration. It says it right here in the first two lines. The real effort was just to not have accountability and transparency. What are you afraid of?
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Yeah, you may respond.
I trust the Senate-confirmed Attorney General of the United States to make the proper legal analysis to determine what of the Jeffrey Epstein files can be released. He was confirmed by the United States Senate as Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States. I trust her to make the right legal determination. But I would ask my colleague from New Jersey, you claim you care about the victims. Do you care about Tammy Nobles? Do you care about Marie Vega, the angel moms who lost their loved ones, their children, to the acts of an illegal alien who never should have been here in the first place? Do you care about them?
Can I respond to the senator's question? Sir, I've known you for 14 years. You and I both care about victims of crime. And to suggest otherwise is stunning to me.
Senator,
if I may finish, sir,
Senator,
I allowed you to finish.
I asked
sir,
you a question.
And I'm trying to
I didn't
answer.
make an accusation.
Mr. Chairman,
I asked you a question.
Mr. Chairman,
answer the question.
I should have allowed a time to respond to the senator's question. I did not interrupt him, and now he's interrupting me.
Please.
It is another violation of the decorum of this place.
Go ahead, Senator Booker.
Senator Cornyn, both you and I have spent our lives. I know your record. I know your history. I know what you've done. I would never, ever question whether you care about the victims of a heinous crime. You ask me if I care? Absolutely.
Thank you.
No, I'm not finished yet.
Well, thank you for answering the question.
Well, I'm going to answer the question in full. You are not sincere.
Let me explain.
Sir, he has put an amendment in.
Would you allow
trying
me
to use the horrific nature
Would you allow me as sponsor of this bill to
Sir,
explain?
I will not pick a fight with Chuck Grassley in the same way that Chuck Grassley won't pick a fight with me.
The reason for his amendment is because your amendment says that this bill that we're working on will not go into effect until we get all these records. And this bill is an opioid bill to help solve some of the drug problems in this country. And we ought to get it passed because it's a bipartisan bill and it's very badly needed.
Sir, may I respond?
Yes.
So I said at the top of my comments, my frustrations, we've said it to your staff, we've said it to others, that when funds like this have been made available, so far in the first 6 months, they're clawing back funds from my state. And that's unfair, and I would like to deal with those. We could deal with them. And given that, I am sticking to an amendment that is not controversial. Okay. I know it's not controversial, sir, because I've seen polling literally on Republican channels that the overwhelming majority of Republicans and Democrats want transparency and accountability. That the overwhelming majority of Americans has seen that one of these two things is lies. Is there truckloads full of evidence as to victims of crime not having justice? Have we been lied to? Who are we trying to protect? What are they trying to hide? This is not controversial. We have Republican leaders in Congress calling for the same thing that this amendment calls for. And so for a second degree to be offered to mine, where you're using horrific crimes to hide the real intention of this, if this amendment is so important, just strike the first two lines that strikes my entire amendment. The intention of this is clear. is to not give the American people accountability, transparency, and truth. That's what we as the Judiciary Committee should be seeking. So I offer a third-degree amendment, preserving every noble thing that the senator from Texas said he wanted.
You can't offer a third-degree amendment.
I can't offer a third degree. Then I ask that we strike the true intention of his amendment, the first two lines.
At this stage, you can't offer a third-degree amendment. If there's some way for you to do that, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, may I respond?
Yes.
Briefly?
Then we'll have a roll call vote, because I know you folks want to get votes on your amendment. I asked you to withdraw them, and you aren't withdrawing them. So
Well, I just want to ask a question, Mr. Chairman. In your opinion, would the addition of these amendments to the underlying bipartisan bill jeopardize our ability to pass this underlying bill, anti-opioid bill, out of committee and across the Senate floor and get it enacted into law? Would these amendments jeopardize that?
I see them jeopardized in ways even beyond what you said.
So,
because if we pass the legislation with this stuff on, it wouldn't go into effect anyway. Who knows how far down the road? When the president signs the bill, I want it to be effective.
That's what I thought, and I appreciate your answering the question. I think the debate that Senator Booker and I have is not something that's going to be resolved today. And so it will continue. So I think regardless of how we act on the underlying bill, that debate will continue, and neither he nor I are giving anything up in terms of our ability to continue to debate this topic. But I'm willing to withdraw my amendment if Senator Booker's willing to withdraw his amendment in the interest of passing this bipartisan anti-opioid bill out of the committee and through the Senate and seeing it enacted into law, and hopefully saving some lives in the process.
Senator Booker.
Mr. Grassley, sir, I have asked for someone to address my New Jersey concerns for months now. There was an incident in which you got a special carve-out for your state when they froze funds, but I have got no justice for New Jersey. So if you want to postpone this and address my New Jersey concerns about the resources we are not getting, and I know you would do that with me in good faith, I would be happy in our next meeting, but right now I am sticking with my amendment.
It'd be faster to address your concerns for New Jersey if you'd asked me to help you with the administration to get something done so you can get your money.
Sir, I've got no, not from you.
Then if you do it through the legislative process, tell me that. Let me make a conversation with the White House on your issue.
But I'm going to stick with my amendment until I get satisfaction on it.
The clerk will call the roll.
What are we voting on? I have no idea. On my amendment?
No, we're voting
on it's the second degree.
Call the roll on the Cornyn amendment.
Mr. Grant.
Aye.
Mr. Cornyn.
Aye.
Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Mr. Cruz. Aye. Mr. Hawley. Mr.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. So his second degree, which had nothing to do with immigration, which was to conceal the Epstein file, Senator Cornyn's effort to conceal the Epstein files right here on 1 and 2 has now violated my amendment. There is no amendment anymore. It passed.
That's right.
And Cornyn is saying, yes, I did something to stop the American public from seeing the Epstein files. It renders my amendment moot. That was the intention of Senator Cornyn's amendment that he just passed, which was to conceal
Chairman, I have to respond. Nothing we are voting on today is going to change any of the debate about the Epstein files. That debate will continue.
That is not true.
If you don't acknowledge that, I just have to, I really question whether your amendment is actually in good faith or not, because nothing's going to change that. But, Mr. Chairman, my second-degree amendment passed, which included striking the Senator Booker's amendment. I believe we've, committee's spoken.
May I respond? He directly referenced me. May I respond? Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
So Mr. Cornyn claims that nothing about this would end debate. We're not seeking to end debate. We're seeking to pass legislation out of this committee that would force the disclosure and the transparency and the truth being made public. We had a chance today that Senator Cornyn blocked to make the truth known to the American public. We had the power today, the possibility today, to force out the truth regarding the Epstein files and the lies and the obfuscation that is happening by this administration. What Senator Cornyn did today was to block the truth about what's happening with the Department of Justice and the Epstein file. It is that on its plain truth, no matter how much he wants to try to dodge that truth.
Mr. Chairman, I have to respond.
Well, quickly, because
I
Graham
will
wants to
respond
speak.
quickly.
Take your time.
What Senator Booker is trying to do is to kill this underlying bipartisan bill that will hopefully save hundreds, maybe thousands of lives because of the opioid crisis. It's already taken tens of thousands of lives in this country over recent years because of the Biden open border policies. So I'm simply trying to preserve this bipartisan legislation, again, that will save lives. The debate that he and I are having over the Epstein files, I doubt will be resolved today based on any amendments either he or I offer. So that's the reason for my amendment, because I want to save lives from the opioid crisis. And I believe his amendment is a distraction from that and actually will jeopardize seeing this bipartisan legislation enacted into law.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
No, I'm calling on Graham.
I thought you were going back and forth, sir. I didn't know that.
I'll be real quick. So if Senator Booker's problem is with the bill itself, which it seems to be, I understand that. Hopefully we can work out a way to get money to your state you think does justice for New Jersey. I got that. That makes perfect sense. But the Epstein amendment, present it some other way, it's not going away. What we're trying to do with this bill is really good. And there's no end to this, a way of doing business here. If this is a headline about Cornyn blocks transparency of Epstein, then that would be sad because he's responding to your amendment that would make the bill, quite frankly, fail. I want to help Senator Booker with your problem, but what you're doing, I don't think is helpful to the bill. I don't think it's helpful to the committee. I don't think it's helpful to your problem.
Senator Graham, there's not been a time in my career where you said you want to help me that you didn't. So I'm going to take you up on that, and I'm going to withdraw I'm going to withdraw my amendment.
You're a good man, and I will try to deliver with Senator Grassley the best I can.
Mr. Chairman, I would also ask leave to withdraw my amendment and vote on the underlying bill.
Those in favor of 1098, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The 1098 is reported. Now, the last bill that we have on the agenda is the Child Act. I co-lead this bill with Senator Durbin. The bill ensures that all individuals with unsupervised access to children is authorized to receive nationwide background checks. I'd like to recognize the bill's lead sponsor, Senator Durbin. I think you already spoke on it, did you? Yeah. Those in favor of 1528, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to all the nominees today, it's obviously a time in America where we should recognize people who want to step forward and serve in the public interest, do so at often great sacrifice, not just to themselves, but to their families. So I just want recognize that this is a very important part of our American tradition, and people that step forward for these offices should be commended for doing that. Mr. Chung, I want to jump right back in to where my colleague was asking you about Mike Davis, if you don't mind me to dig in a little bit more here. And if that's one of my videos, keep it playing, but if it's not me, you should cut it off right now. Do you agree with Mr. Davis that you guys are friends, correct?
We are friends, Senator.
Yeah, thank you. And Mr. Davis recommended you, or did Mr. Davis recommend you or otherwise mention you to anyone in the Trump administration for this judicial vacancy?
I believe he might have, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Do you know exactly what did he say or to whom he made that recommendation?
I do not know that, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Davis, did Mr. Davis, excuse me, or anyone else associated with the Article 3 project advise or prepare you for any aspect of this nomination?
No, Senator.
Okay, and Mr. Davis is the founder of the Article 3 project. According to the organization's website, he founded the Article 3 project after he helped Trump win the Gorsuch and Kavanaugh nominations. And Mr. Davis said that we saw how relentless and evil too many of today's Democrats have become. They're Marxists who hate America. They believe in censorship. They have politicized and weaponized our justice system. Do you agree with Mr. Davis's statements that today's Democrats are relentless and evil?
Senator, Mr. Davis's views as expressed there are not necessarily the views of mine.
I didn't ask if they were necessarily. I just asked, do you think that today's Democrats are relentless and evil?
Senator, you're asking me to comment on a political question, and as a nominee to a judicial position, I cannot and should not speculate or comment on that.
Sir, I spend a lot of time working to try to affirm this fact that we are one nation under God, that the lines that divide us are nowhere near as strong as the ties that bind us. I'm proud of my relationships with my friends on the other side of the aisle. I think it hurts Mr. Kennedy to when I say that he and I are friends. I could say unequivocally, Republicans are not evil, but you're telling me you will not say on the record here that Democrats are not evil?
Senator, you're asking a personal and policy-laden question that I cannot answer.
So put yourself in the position of a person coming before you who's watching this right now. And you're supposed to be a judge who's impartial. And you're telling me that for this nomination, I have a constitutional obligation to advise and consent, that I should be in any way hopeful that a judge will be that impartial if he cannot say that Americans writ large, because of their freedom of party association, that you can't say that whether you're deciding to be a Democrat or Republican or independent, you can't say in this hearing that you don't think that that makes a person evil?
Senator, I can commit to this committee that whoever comes before my court, should I be fortunate enough to be confirmed, will be treated with respect and their arguments will be
and not
accorded.
A presumption that they are evil.
Senator, whoever they are, Republican or Democrat or independent, who steps to my court, they will be accorded full consideration of their arguments.
Mr. David, I don't know what you're afraid of. I really don't, Mr. Tang. I honestly don't know where have we gotten to the point in American history that someone up for a position such as yours, and I've seen this courageously from people on both sides of the aisle who understand that the judiciary should be above partisanship, who understand the judiciary in many ways should be a sobered assessor of fact. It is deeply disappointing to me that you cannot tell the American public right now that the person that you're affiliated with their heated language, with their casting in broad brushes, doubling down on the toxins that are making life here dangerous. And frankly, I've talked to federal judges who tell me about having to protect themselves. We had a horrific incident in our state where a federal judge was targeted, their husband shot, their son killed. In this time in America, to render an answer of, I can't answer that, to me, is additive to the toxins that are in our society that are pitting people against each other. You are up for a position in the highest court in the land, and you can't simply say, I don't think Democrats are evil. Is that what you're telling me?
Senator, I wish I were up for a position in the highest court of the land, but I'm up for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Sir, to Americans, the federal courts are the highest courts in the land. So I appreciate your correction and your diligence and dutiful attention to detail. But right now, I am gravely disappointed that you can't simply say what I can say is that my colleagues are not evil, that Democrats are not evil, that Republicans are not evil, and this kind of rhetoric is damaging. I am deeply disappointed, sir.
I'm the chairman now. We've got a new sheriff, and I'm going to call on.
I know other people want to ask questions.
Thank you. Senator Booker.
Professor Siddharaman, first of all, my tone will be different than Senator Hawley's, but the same energy. I want to bring that to you for that hair. The same negative energy there, sir. I just want to stipulate that for the record. Okay, are you ready for me?
I'll trade you an inch of hair for an inch of height if we can make that deal.
Ooh, we might have a deal. We might have a deal, sir. Okay, now I see. I'd like to permission to treat the witness as hostile. Okay, sir. I'm really concerned about Americans who don't have access to air travel because of where they live, and I want to know how can we ensure that millions of Americans who don't live around major cities can have access to reliable, efficient flights. And that the airlines themselves stay afloat. Can you give me your perspective on that?
Well, thanks, Senator. I agree this is a big problem. And I think the core thing to start by understanding is why this happens. Why are small cities, why are mid-sized cities losing air service? And I think there's really two reasons behind it. The first is that in some places it is uneconomical to serve. The volume of passengers is very small, and it's costly to fly. And in those places, it's not going to make sense for an airline to serve unless they get a subsidy or unless there's a requirement, a kind of duty to serve like we have in other areas of law. The second reason is because of consolidation. As a number of people have mentioned already up on this witness stand, and as has been mentioned by Senator Lee, this is an industry in which there are network effects, there's economies of scale, and there are barriers to entry. And those things create tendencies towards consolidation and concentration. And when you have that, there's an incentive for airlines to focus their operations in bigger and bigger cities. That's why we have the hubs that we have. And that often means dehubbing certain places or reducing service to others. And I think this is a serious problem because we have an airline system that is essential infrastructure for our country. It provides.
And you in your testimony go into that a lot. And you speak actually, I think, quite persuasively about the economic benefit to our country as a whole when you ease transportation. Roads, we don't not pave roads to areas. And you almost say that it should be almost like a utility and that kind of obligation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And if you think about it this way, would you ever start a Fortune 500 company in a city with no air service? You wouldn't do it. If you were an entrepreneur with a great idea, a kid growing up.
But we've even seen VC dollars, far more, if you have a direct from Silicon Valley, VC dollars more. That's how vital it is that people won't even necessarily even invest in businesses that don't have that. There's a correlation, I should say, maybe not a causation.
And that's why this is basic infrastructure. And I think that what we want as a country is for people who grow up anywhere to have opportunities.
But your solution to that is for Congress to act.
Yes, I think that's right. So the current solution that we have right now I don't think is working, and that's the Essential Air Service Program. It provides a subsidy to a number of very small cities, but these are very, very small cities, and they don't include a number of other places that have lost service in recent years. I think one proposal that I've put forward, and these are ideas that I think should be debated, is what I call the NFL draft pick model. And the idea is that the biggest airlines would be like the teams. There'd be a bunch of cities that would be like the players, and the airlines would have to pick cities that they want to serve, would go in order, until all the cities are covered, and they would have to have affordable access.
Right, and I'm just going to interrupt you because I want to get one more question in before my time, but it is this concern I have about the hollowing out of certain communities because of consolidation. We've talked about in the agricultural sector. We've seen entire businesses being killed in towns that are the connective tissue of our country. And I think this should be one of the things we should be looking at when these towns and communities lose air traffic, they lose economic investment, they lose opportunity, and many times they lose out on what adds, how should I say it, adds vibrancy to a community. I just want to shift, Mr. McGee, to you really quickly in the remaining time that I have, is can you speak to me about an idea that I really believe in, which is this idea of passengers have fundamental rights, and what Congress could do to better protect passengers who still often report very bad experiences. I think that Senator Hawley was scratching at that as well. Well, maybe not scratching, but pounding at that as well.
Yes, thank you, Senator. The fact is the United States lags much of the world in terms of passenger rights. This is the standard operating system in the European Union, United Kingdom, Canada, India, countries all over the world, that there are mandatory rights in terms of how you'll be compensated when there is a flight delay, a cancellation, mishandled baggage. Here in the United States, we greatly allow airlines to police themselves. They write contracts of carriage written for and by themselves, and we adhere to them every time we swipe a credit card and buy a ticket. Now, the fact is that the irony is the largest U.S. airlines, Delta, American, United, if you're flying on them and you encounter a problem, a canceled flight or a delay on foreign soil, you will be treated much better than on American soil. So if you're on Delta and your flight is canceled, you want to be in Brussels, not Atlanta.
I want to just be respectful of Senator Moody, but I just want to say, because there's so much bipartisan space, and I'm not trying to be partisan, but the Trump administration has rolled back some rules that would have given passengers transparency. Can you talk about the actual impact for American consumers of that?
It would be devastating. As I said, we already lag much of the world, but the few existing protections that we have, as I said, Airlines for America issued a 93-page suggestion to the DOT, and unfortunately, it seems like this DOT is adhering to it. It would be devastating. Right now, they're doing it in a request for further information. We and others will be weighing in, but we should all be on guard that if you think air travel is problematic now, it will be absolutely awful a year from now if the DOT rolls back the provisions that we already have.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Moody.